I'm the highest civilization in the universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151, Free Star 8 Group. With her eyes rolling around, Tiffany looked back at Tyrion. After a few wry smiles, her expression suddenly changed, revealing a look of joy, and she said, "This, of course, couldn't be better. With your joining, our small group will be much stronger, and even in the distribution of materials, we will get more," Tiffany said with a smile. Tyrion nodded repeatedly and said, "That's right, that's right." Li Ming stood up with a smile, walked a few steps forward to Tyrion's side, and said, "Since Big Brother Tyrion has agreed, Big Brother Tyrion will still be the boss in the future, and I will be Big Brother Tyrion's deputy." As Li Ming spoke, he helped Tyrion sit back in front of the operating table. Tyrion was stunned for a moment, and he didn't dare to refuse, nor did he dare to say anything more. He could only follow Li Ming's wishes and sit in front of the operating table, but when he saw Li Ming next to him, he felt uneasy and uneasy. You sit too," Tyrion said very politely. Li Ming smiled and sat next to Tyrion. As soon as he sat down, his face suddenly became stern. He glanced around and said, "Troy, target Parlock, teleport quickly. Matt, check the energy operation of the spacecraft." Troy and Matt looked at each other, but still replied, "Yes." After the two of them left, Li Ming smiled and looked at Tyrion, saying, "Brother Tyrion, I arranged this. Do you have any objection?" No. Tyrion waved his hand and replied, not daring to have any opinions in his heart. Although Tyrion was reluctant, he had his difficulties. His life was in Li Ming's hands, so how could he dare to complain? He could only obey completely. Li Ming's eyes were fixed on the operating table, paying attention to the movement trajectory of the spacecraft at any time. Space travel is not just flying. Flying is only used in some areas of space. Most of the movement is carried out by teleportation. The teleportation distance has a huge relationship with the size, system, and energy of the spacecraft. Advanced civilizations can all create such teleportation spacecraft. It is not possible to reach Pollock star from the current position in one step. It can only be advanced little by little according to the upper limit of the spacecraft's own transmission distance. While the spacecraft was slowly approaching Pollock star, a small spacecraft in the Magic Source system was flying in space. After multiple long-distance transmissions, this small spacecraft entered the flight state and slowly approached the planet Insignificant. In front of the operating table in the spacecraft, Imogene's face was solemn. His eyes looked at the areas marked with blue light and said, "Is there any result for the spacecraft number 0103 where Li Ming is?" The spacecraft liaison officer Gale immediately stepped forward and saluted. After hesitating for a while, he whispered, "Not yet." Imogen immediately showed displeasure. Gale looked panicked and hurriedly said again, "But the headquarters on the mother planet said that they have found the approximate trajectory." Approximate trajectory? It's like this. It may be affected by the impact of the shockwave. The signal of the decomposition cabin number 0103 was affected. Even the headquarters can only capture it intermittently, so the current whereabouts is still unclear. Gale replied tremblingly. Obviously, this result was unacceptable to Imogen. He looked at the operating table again with angry eyes and whispered, "Have you found the source of the attack?" Gale's expression eased, and he said confidently, "The headquarters has determined the source of the attack, which comes from the 13th beast star, Prey Star. Prey Star is a dwarf planet on the edge of our Magic Source system, and it is a planet ruled by the Prey Orcs." Gale continued, as if emphasizing the situation of Prey Star. Imogen was naturally familiar with this planet, but he was still a little surprised to hear the name of this planet, and whispered to himself, "Prey Star." When mentioning Prey Star, Imogen seemed to show some helplessness. After a slight sigh, he said, "Continue to keep in touch with the headquarters. The most important task at the moment is to find the 0103 decomposition cabin." "Yes," Gale answered and turned away. At the same time, at the edge of the distant Magic Source system, the edge of the space of Pollock star was flashing with stars, and spaceships of different sizes were gradually appearing. These spaceships flashed with lights from time to time, as if sending some signals. In a long spaceship, Li Ming sat quietly in front of the operating table and watched the various subtle changes on the operating table. The blue light lines intertwined and woven each other, and the appearance and structure of the surrounding spaceships had emerged little by little, all clearly displayed on the radar map. Some spaceships also continuously sent connection requests or voice messages to the spaceship where Li Ming was. Li Ming did not accept the connection request immediately, but he curiously clicked on the voice message and listened to it. "Terran? Why are you here so late? Don't you want to invite me to your ship?" After hearing this message, Li Ming turned his eyes and looked at Terran. Upon hearing this voice, Terran immediately showed an angry expression, as if he hated the person who spoke the voice very much, but when he was about to say something, he stopped talking when he saw Li Ming. "Who is this person?" Li Ming asked softly. "Ah, this is the leader of the Free Star Raiders, Friedman." Terran hurriedly replied. Although he answered so easily, he hated the other party very much in his heart. Li Ming had already learned this from the other party's mind. Li Ming nodded slightly and didn't say much, but Tiffany on the side added, "Friedman is the right-hand man of Ismail, the leader of the Sun Star Raid group. He often relies on the powerful group to occupy resources, but because he is Ismail's subordinate, no one dares to provoke him. Although he is also a 7th level civilization, he is a fellow tribesman brought by Ismail from Moses Star, and he has always been arrogant. He is quite powerful," Tiffany said in detail, with a bit of fear in her words. Li Ming listened carefully, still nodded slightly without saying anything, and looked at the operating table again. Another message came. Li Ming pointed with his hand, and the voice sounded again. "What? Brothers from the same camp, can't we meet? I have the detailed information of the star raiding plan in my hand. Brother, are you not interested?" As soon as he heard the detailed information about this star raiding plan, Li Ming immediately became interested, and his eyes turned to look at Terran and Tiffany again. The two looked disdainful, as if they were extremely disgusted with Friedman, and even didn't want to pay attention to each other. "Brother Terran, does he really have the information about the star raid project?" Li Ming asked tentatively. Terran showed hesitation, and after a brief thought, he said, "I'm not sure about this either. This person has a close relationship with Ismail, and the information about this star raid is no exception. But this person is too greedy. Every time he comes to me, he takes something away. I can't do anything about him." So, while Terran was speaking, new information was displayed on the radar map. The spaceship of the Free Star Raid group had begun to slowly approach Terran's spaceship, as if they had to connect. The connection request was still being sent repeatedly, and another voice message came. "This time we can only stay in space and cannot enter the Pollock planet. Aren't you curious, brother? Although I have taken a lot of things from you every time, I only told you this kind of key information, so you are not at a disadvantage." After hearing this information, Li Ming winked at Terran and said, "Since the other party has said so, let's get ready to connect, brother Terran." After this, Terran naturally could not refuse anymore. In desperation, he could only bite the bullet and press the button to confirm the connection. After the mutual connection was confirmed, the systems of the two spacecraft began to connect, and at the same time the program entered the autonomous stage, and the spacecraft's every move was completely automated. Seeing all this proceeding in an orderly manner, Li Ming showed satisfaction. No matter what this Friedman was, he was targeting Terran. Li Ming only wanted to obtain information about the star skimming plan. Even if the other party wanted to gain some benefits, it would be Terran's loss, and it had nothing to do with Li Ming. Chapter 152, Confident. The free spaceship was huge, more than twice the size of the Terran spaceship. The large spaceship released the connecting channel, and then the small spaceship docked. The operation was completed in a moment. Li Ming stood up, stepped out of the operating table, and stood aside like an ordinary subordinate, motionless. This action puzzled Terran, and he couldn't help but look back. Before he could speak, Li Ming said, "Brother Terran, you are the boss here after all. It is somewhat inappropriate for me to sit next to you. If Friedman comes in, let Tiffany handle it." As he said this, Li Ming glanced at Tiffany on the other side. Okay. Terran replied quickly, and at the same time looked at Tiffany. Tiffany lowered her head slightly, with a smile on her face, but did not say anything. Pa. Heavy footsteps came from the passage in the distance. The figure did not appear, but the sound had arrived. Brother Tyron, I haven't seen you for many years. When the voice came, two figures had already walked out of the passage. The two men had the same appearance, with semicircular heads, somewhat similar to Inkina's oval head. One was from the 7th order civilization and the other from the 6th order civilization. When he saw someone coming in, Tyron immediately stood up and greeted him with a smile, saying, "Long time no see, Friedman. Hehe. If it weren't for this alliance summons, I'm afraid we wouldn't know when we would meet again." Friedman said kindly. His expression and behavior seemed to be as close to Tyron as brothers. Tyron smiled and quickly asked Friedman to sit next to him, saying politely, "Even if you don't come, I'm still going to chat on your spaceship and get some information about this star raid. It's great that you can condescend to come to me." Friedman chuckled and came to the operating table and was about to sit down, but he stopped as soon as he bent his body and his eyes slowly glanced at Li Ming, revealing a look of surprise. "Who is this?" Feeling the breath of Li Ming's 7th level civilization, Friedman's relaxed expression suddenly tightened, and he kept looking at Li Ming. Just as Tyron was about to explain something, Tiffany on the side stepped forward and said, "This is our vice captain, Li Ming." Oh. Friedman looked at Li Ming with a respectful look, his eyes rolled, and he sat down slowly, while thinking about something. After Friedman sat down completely, Tyron said, "It's strange this time. Every time the Alliance takes action, they go to the planet Parlik for negotiation. Why do they only let us stay in space this time?" Friedman smiled lightly, and didn't answer immediately, but his body swayed slightly in his seat, twisting and turning, as if sitting on pins and needles. His eyes occasionally glanced at Li Ming. The generosity he had just brought in disappeared, and he became a little restrained and nervous at this time. "What? Isn't it convenient to disclose this matter?" Although Tyron saw that Friedman was different, he didn't say it, but continued to ask. This? Friedman looked as if he wanted to say something but stopped. He turned his eyes slightly and looked at Tyron. He was suddenly startled. "Hey, brother Tyron, what's wrong with your chest? Are you injured?" Friedman noticed the vines growing on Tyron's chest and asked with great concern. Tyron looked at the vines growing on his chest, hesitated for a moment, and said, "This is just a minor injury, not worth mentioning. Let's talk about this plunder." Friedman smiled, glanced at Li Ming, and let out a long breath. "Well, I came here to tell you. The target of this star raid is Enkinyat star." Enkinyat star? Tyron's green eyes immediately widened a little, revealing an unbelievable expression. His body slowly sat up a little and glanced at Tiffany beside him. Tiffany was also nervous and couldn't believe it, but after a little thought, he smiled and said, "It's possible that we won't attack Inkinaya. The three great magicians of Inkinaya are all 9th level civilizations. Our entire Parlik planet only has one 9th level existence, Zalalia, and she is from the Moching Star Raid group." Tiffany said carefully, and Tyron nodded repeatedly after listening, and looked at Friedman with a puzzled look. The doubts of the two seemed to be expected by Friedman. After glancing at the two, he stood up and said, "Not only do you not believe it, but I don't believe it either. But this is the news I got. The specific situation still needs to wait for the instructions of Lord Icemail. Okay, that's all I have to say. I still have some things to deal with over there, so I won't stay any longer." As soon as the voice fell, Friedman turned around and walked away quickly, as if in a hurry. Before Tyron even said anything, the figure had disappeared in the passage. After one of them left, Li Ming took 2 steps forward and sat in front of the operating table, revealing a faint smile. This strange smile made Tyron and Tiffany confused, and they just looked at Li Ming quietly. The two of them naturally didn't know that Li Ming had obtained a lot of information from Friedman's brain through his wisdom eye ability, including the details of the star raiding plan. Originally, Friedman was going to extort some resources from Tyron, but he didn't dare to speak when he saw the existence of Li Ming, the 7th level vice captain. However, he didn't want to reveal more information about this star raiding, so he could only leave in a hurry. Just when Li Ming was about to study this information carefully, the operating table suddenly lit up, and a red message flashed from the blue light. Li Ming's keen consciousness immediately noticed the situation. Confidential. From Pollock Star Raiding Camp. Tyrion and Tiffany also saw this message at the same time, but did not open it immediately, but looked at Li Ming. Li Ming raised his right hand and lightly tapped it. A message consisting of a paragraph of text has emerged. This confidential message was sent by ice mail of the Star Raiders camp. The content was to let all the Star Raiders launch an attack on Inkina at a specified time. "Are you really attacking Inkina?" Tiffany exclaimed, looking at Tyrion and Li Ming for a while, with a panic expression, even a little at a loss. "No, it's not an attack on Inkina," Li Ming said lightly. His expression was calm and natural. His words were extremely confident, and he looked like he had it all planned out. Tyrion and Tiffany looked at each other, and then looked at Li Ming, as if waiting for Li Ming to continue speaking. Li Ming looked like he had insight into the secrets of heaven, with a smug look on his face. After a slight smile, he said, "From now on, all the movements of this spaceship will be decided by me. If you don't obey." The stern voice accompanied by a fierce look made Tyrion and Tiffany nod their heads repeatedly. Even though the two of them didn't understand, they didn't dare to ask more questions, and could only obey Li Ming's words. Friedman, who had returned to the free spacecraft, sat in front of the operating table with some anger, his eyes full of displeasure. "Friedman, it seems that you have returned empty-handed this time." An alien with the same appearance as Friedman, and also a 7th level civilization, slowly sat down beside him. Friedman sighed slightly and said, "It doesn't matter if we return empty-handed, but do you know, Frieda? There is a deputy captain of a 7th level civilization on the Terran spaceship." "Huh? 7th level civilization?" The alien named Frieda was somewhat surprised, and then said, "In just a few years, a 7th level deputy captain has appeared?" Friedman nodded slowly, his expression solemn, and said, "But I didn't tell him the details of this star raid. I believe he should have received Ishmael's message now. It's a pity that we can't blackmail him before he becomes cannon fodder. Forget it, there's no need to dwell on these. How is Fritz preparing on Simu Star, and when are we leaving?" Friedman changed the subject and his eyes became serious. "Don't worry, brother. Israel has made careful arrangements on Simu, and has reached a consensus with the Shi and Lagrazan people. But after entering the Io ruins, we can start," Frieda said confidently, as if everything was already in place. Friedman nodded in satisfaction after hearing this, and snorted, and said, "Ismail is stationed on Palak, and Israel is preparing for the Io ruins on Simu. It's finally time to start." Ha 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 ha. There seemed to be some evil aura in the laughter. Chapter 153, Simu Galaxy. In the vast space, a giant meteorite floated slowly, and not far from this giant meteorite, a smaller meteorite was also flying towards it. The two meteorites, one large and one small, were moving towards each other, approaching each other, and were about to collide with each other. It looked like a meteorite, but it was actually Inkina's spaceship. This giant spaceship took off from Inkina, and was here to welcome Imogen, who was riding in the decomposition cabin. When the decomposition cabin approached the meteorite spaceship, it was like a stone falling on a mountain, and was directly embedded on it. For a meteorite spaceship with an uneven surface, the decomposition cabin was inconspicuous, as if it was a piece of this giant spaceship. After the docking was completed, the door of the decomposition cabin opened directly, and Imogen walked out quickly, and came to a new space. His hurried steps did not stop at all, and he went straight to the main cabin. The giant meteorite spaceship was several kilometers long and wide, like a giant meteorite floating in space, and the interior was even more connected in all directions, with a wide space. The main cabin has an area of several hundred square meters. The command console is in the middle of the cabin. As soon as Imogen entered the cabin, he came to the console, and sat down slowly. At this time, there was another person sitting in front of the console, and he was also a 9th level civilization. "Hesher, who told you to leave Inkina?" Imogen said dissatisfiedly, as soon as he sat down. The 9th level great magician named Hesher rolled the green curls on her head with her fingers. With a pair of black charming eyes, she glanced at Imogen and said, "The plan has changed, so I came out to greet you." Imogen snorted lightly, not caring, and did not say anything. Hesha opened her mouth, revealing a mouthful of black teeth, and said, "Now you have to go to Samustar. The situation there is not optimistic." "What do you mean? Isn't Nugent on Samustar? Did the Lagrazan people take action?" Imogen said with a little panic and great concern. Hesha shook her head slightly and said, "That's not the case, but the AIO ruins have been excavated, and local wars may be inevitable. I just got the news that the Lagrazan people have joined forces with the Shixing people, which will be very unfavorable to us." Hesha said seriously, her sharp fangs chewing in her mouth, as if she was chewing something while speaking. Imogen looked as if he was thinking something else. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Join forces? Are they going to fight against us together?" Hesha looked solemn, raised his eyebrows slightly, and said, "In the nearby galaxies, there are only a handful of 9th level civilizations. Commander Odom of the Shixing fleet is one, and Commander Seema of the Lagrazans is one. The other is the leader of the Pollux Star, Moching, Star Raiding Group, Solalia. These forces together have only 3 9th level people, but we have 3 9th level people in Incanaya. Facing a big cake like the AIO ruins, they will definitely take action. The cooperation between Shixing and Lagrazan has been confirmed." Hesha said seriously, and her expression became unusually serious. Imogen fell into deep thought, nodded slightly, and said, "If that's the case, then I have to go to Samustar." As he said this, Imogen turned his eyes and looked at Hesha again, saying, "Have you found the decomposition cabin number 0103 that I asked you to find? Don't worry about this, I believe there will be results soon. When I return to Inkinaya, I will send you the latest situation immediately, and this spaceship will be handed over to you. I will take your decomposition cabin back." Hesha stood up while speaking, as if she was ready to turn around and leave. "Hesha." Imogen called the other party in a low voice, and slowly stood up. With a solemn face, he said very seriously, "The decomposition cabin number 0103 must be found. That is the biggest gain of my trip to Fuller Star." Hesha's footsteps stopped where they were. It seems that she has never seen Imogen so serious. After a stiff expression stayed on her face for a few seconds, she smiled charmingly and left quickly. At the same time, the Terran spaceship where Li Ming was located began to set sail. At this time, a large number of small star raiding groups had gathered in the space around the Pollux Star, and they were all ready to move. Li Ming marked the coordinates on the operating table, then glanced at Tyran beside him and said, "Let Troy enter this space." Tyran looked at the marked area on the operating table curiously, showing a puzzled expression, and at the same time, turned his eyes to look at Li Ming, not knowing what the other party meant, but still winked at Tiffany and said, "Why don't you do what Li Ming said?" Tiffany bowed and saluted, and left quickly. Tyran stared at the marked airspace on the console, hesitated for a moment, and asked, "Aren't we going to Incana?" That was Ismail's order. Li Ming did not respond to the other party. He looked around, and found that there were only himself and Tyran in the main cabin. After thinking for a while, he said, "It's okay to tell you. The message sent by Ismail is just an illusion. The real destination of the Star Raid is not Incania, but Simu." Li Ming said calmly, but at the end, his eyes suddenly showed a strange color, giving people an unusual feeling. Tyran took a deep breath, and looked at the console again. The marked location was near Simu. Simu is located in the airspace near the star systems. There is only this planet in the star system, where it is located. It can be said that it is a star-planet galaxy. Of course, there are many celestial bodies in the galaxy besides Simu, but they are all small celestial bodies, and they can't even be called dwarf planets. This galaxy is also called the Simu Galaxy, and it is also the galaxy with the richest resources. When Li Ming obtained the information from Friedman's brain, he had basically mastered the detailed information of Simu. This galaxy is full of stardust and stardust. These two substances are also relatively important resources. One can be used to make stardust weapons, and the other can be used to synthesize star GUI. Both are items that many civilizations are vying to obtain. In addition, the planet Simu is rich in minerals and has amazing energy storage. Therefore, many galaxies have garrisons on Simu to ensure that their interests are not violated. The rich resources, coupled with the unique environment, have given birth to a more advanced civilization on Simu. However, this advanced civilization has disappeared, and no one knows the reason. This has left only some ruins on Simu. The ruins of advanced civilizations often contain items beyond the cognition of low-level civilizations. The value of these items far exceeds those resources. Once new ruins are discovered, it often indicates that a new war is about to come. Fighting and plundering can happen at any time. The law of the jungle seems to never change at any time. The latest discovery of the Simu planet is the Io ruins, and various advanced civilizations are preparing for it. Li Ming also got relevant information from Friedman's mind. This opportunity to explore the ruins of advanced civilizations is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and Li Ming naturally wants to do everything he can to seize this opportunity. Tyron naturally had no idea about this, but when he heard Li Ming mention Simu, his face changed again, waving his hands and shaking his head, and said, "Impossible, impossible. On Simu, there are all kinds of people, and there are garrisons from various galaxies. We Star Raiders don't have the strength to do this." Tyron whispered to himself, not believing what Li Ming said at all. Li Ming didn't care. He just smiled and said, "It's okay. When you arrive at the place I marked, you just wait there. I don't need to land on Simu Star. This shouldn't threaten you." Hearing this, Tyron still had a hesitant expression on his face, and his eyes revealed a bit of worry. "If we don't go to Enkea, I'm afraid Ismail will blame me." Li Ming laughed several times, and then said, "You don't have to worry about this. Just do as I say. You will definitely thank me in the future." Tyron smiled in agreement, but still looked confused. He had no idea what Li Ming meant. But since Li Ming said so, he had to do what Li Ming said no matter what. After all, the blood-dissolving flower on his body had not been removed yet. Chapter 154, Safety Coordinates. The Magic Source System, Insignificant, is a huge gray-green planet. 2/3 of the area is covered by gray rocks, which are interspersed with a lot of green vegetation. From space, it looks like a meteorite covered with green buds, weird and peculiar. There are 2 satellites near Insignificant, which allows a civilization to see the moon both day and night. In addition to the 2 satellites, there are many meteorite-like celestial bodies floating on the edge of Insignificant. These objects that look like meteorites are not real meteorites, but Insignificant's space station. In the calm space, everything is running in an orderly manner, but at the edge of the distant magic source system, more than a dozen spaceships of different sizes are heading towards Insignificant. These dozen spaceships are not only of different sizes, but also very unusual in appearance, as if they are a bunch of miscellaneous troops put together. This is the force sent by Ismail of Pollux to attack Insignificant. According to the plan, the Tyron spaceship that Li Ming is riding should also be in this fleet, but on the contrary, at this time, Li Ming's Tyron spaceship is already near the Simu galaxy in another direction. The Simu galaxy has dense and complex small celestial bodies, which seriously affects the airspace for spacecraft transmission. Any spacecraft approaching the Simu galaxy knows that fixed transmission coordinates are required to enter this space, because there are not many areas available for transmission, and these coordinates are confidential to the major galaxies, and outsiders have almost no way of knowing them. If you want to enter this galaxy by flying, you may not be able to reach it for hundreds of years. Li Ming skillfully edited the transmission coordinates on the operating table, with a calm expression and natural behavior, as if he knew these coordinates well. Looking at Li Ming's operation, Tyron and Tiffany were both at a loss, looking at each other from time to time, and sweat came out of their foreheads from time to time. After all, the area marked by Li Ming is already inside the Simu galaxy. Tiffany looked at Tyron carefully and whispered, "This is the Simu system. There are no safe coordinates. If you teleport like this, it's very dangerous." Tyron knew this. After glancing at Tiffany, he looked at Li Ming carefully. Just when he was about to say something, Li Ming had already marked the last coordinate. He nodded with satisfaction and said, "Let Troy teleport to the area I marked until he reaches the destination." After Li Ming finished speaking, Tyrion and Tiffany did not move, but looked at Li Ming with strange eyes. After Li Ming noticed the abnormality of the two, his face changed instantly and he said, "What? Is my word not working?" Seeing that Li Ming was about to get angry, Tiffany quickly waved her hand and shook her head, and shrank back. Tyrion also looked helpless, stuttering, "No, that's not. It's just that this semi-system is dense with meteorites. I'm worried that something will happen to your mark." Then, Tyrion said carefully, blinking his green bean eyes, and looking at the operating table. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and saw what the two were thinking. He chuckled twice and said, "Do as I say. I guarantee that there will be no problems with the spacecraft. Besides, I'm also on this spacecraft. Would I not care about my own life?" "That's right." Tyrion looked as if he had suddenly realized something. He turned his eyes to look at Tiffany and whispered, "Go, do as Li Ming says." Tiffany also felt strange. She had never thought about this question. After a slight hesitation, she left quickly again. Looking at the radar map, the spacecraft jumped on the radar map like a light spot. Each jumping point was the coordinate marked by Li Ming in advance. This seemed normal and natural to Li Ming, but Tyrion looked frightened. It seemed that every jump of the light spot jumped on Tyrion's nerves. Every transmission of the spacecraft consumes a lot of energy and requires a certain amount of preparation time. This has a great relationship with the civilization that built the spacecraft. Tyrion's spacecraft was built by the scientific and technological civilization of Shixing. The mature system technology and high-strength transmission materials make each transmission of the spacecraft extremely stable. The daily maintenance of the spacecraft was carried out by Matt. Although this Shixing man with only a 5th level civilization did not have any unique and extraordinary qualities, his contribution to the Terran spacecraft was still huge. This was probably the reason why Tyrion kept him by his side. Li Ming slowly closed his eyes and stopped looking at the operating table. He only used his consciousness occasionally to sense it. As time passed, Li Ming just focused his mind and rested without saying a word. "No, it's not good." A loud shout came, and Tiffany ran over in a panic. Li Ming opened his eyes and turned his eyes to look at Tiffany, but did not speak. Tiffany quickly stabilized her emotions and said, "Look at the radar map." Li Ming turned his eyes back and looked at the radar map. A strange phenomenon had already emerged. There was an extra spaceship near the Terran spaceship, and this spaceship was not unfamiliar. It was Friedman's spaceship. Tyrion noticed this and immediately opened his eyes wide with a look of surprise on his face. He looked at the radar map and Li Ming for a while, and his expression was extremely panicked. But Li Ming was calm and natural, as if everything was expected. This confident look made Tyrion and Tiffany unable to see any clues, and they could only suppress their nervousness. Li Ming gently raised his hand and swiped a few times on the radar map. A planet had emerged, which was the planet of Simu. Finally here, Li Ming showed a satisfied look, and his words and actions seemed to ignore Friedman's spaceship, as if he didn't see it. Li Ming switched the radar map to show the lifeboat, and then swiped his finger again. A small lifeboat in the lifeboat had started. After doing this, Li Ming prepared to walk towards the lifeboat. "Wait." Tyrion hurriedly stood up and called out. Li Ming stood still after hearing the voice, and looked back at Tyrion. Tyrion first looked at the lifeboat on the radar map, then looked at the vines growing on his body, and said, "Before you leave, can I remove the blood-dissolving flower on my body first?" Li Ming turned around, raised his mouth slightly, and said, "As long as I don't activate the blood-dissolving flower, there will be no danger. It will automatically disappear from your body after a certain period of time. Before leaving, I stored some information in your operating table. Take a closer look. It will be helpful to you." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Ming walked away quickly. Tyrion breathed a sigh of relief. Since the blood-dissolving flower would not endanger his life, he could rest assured. But thinking of Li Ming's words, that he had left important information, he immediately looked at the operating table and reached out to operate it. Tiffany also came over curiously. After a few seconds, a blue light flashed on the operating table, and some information had emerged. After just a quick glance, Tyrion's face changed drastically, and he said to himself, "The attack on Inkinaya is just for Before Tyrion finished speaking, Tiffany continued, it is to disperse Kana's combat force deployment on the planet Simu, and provide assistance for Israel to enter the ruins of Io. Tiffany opened her eyes wide, opened her mouth, and looked at Tyrion at the same time, and continued in panic. Brother Tyrion, is this true? Tyrion looked serious, frowned, and looked at the message left by Li Ming, with a complicated expression on his face. At this time, in the main cabin of Friedman's spacecraft, two aliens were looking at the radar map with puzzled expressions. These two were Friedman and Frieda. What's going on? How did Tyrion get here? Shouldn't he be in Inkina? Frieda shouted loudly in dissatisfaction, and looked at Friedman. As soon as he noticed Frieda's gaze, Friedman said angrily, how should I know this? He is not on Icemail's list. At this point, Friedman's face suddenly changed, his eyes showed a fierce look, and he said sternly, Frieda, are you doubting me? Frieda was startled when she heard the voice, and waved her hand quickly, but just as she was about to say something, there was a flash on the radar map, and the Terran spaceship actually flew out a small lifeboat. According to the radar map, the small lifeboat that flew out was heading for Simutstar. Oh no, they are leaving for Simutstar. Friedman exclaimed directly, after noticing the abnormality of the radar map. Chapter 155, Battle at the top of the outer system. Frieda looked at the flashing light spots on the radar map, her eyes suddenly narrowed slightly, she gritted her teeth, and said viciously, let's follow him, we can't let this guy succeed first. Friedman seemed to be afraid of something, his eyes showed hesitation, and he said hesitantly, but, boss, Israel hasn't sent us his signal yet. By the time the boss sends a signal, it may be too late. Frieda looked anxious, as if she was afraid of delaying something important. Friedman took a deep breath, gritted his teeth, snorted coldly, and said, okay, then let's go. So as not to let others get there first. As soon as the voice fell, the two quickly left the operating table, and walked towards the lifeboat. Compared to these two people, Tyrion showed a sigh of regret in the spaceship. While looking at the radar map, he said, I'm really lucky. It seems that what Li Ming said is true. As he said this, a video screen was displayed on the radar map. In the screen, more than a dozen warships were shaky in space, all of which were damaged to varying degrees. They were obviously attacked, but these attacks did not have strong destructive power, so they only damaged the spaceships, and did not completely destroy them. This is the message sent by Alto. They were attacked before they approached Inkina. Fortunately, it was just a warning attack, and did not destroy them. Tyrion said, sighed slightly, and nodded repeatedly, with a look of secretly rejoicing. Tiffany's eyes rolled, and after thinking for a while, she was suddenly startled, looked at Tyrion with both eyes, and said, so, the information left by Li Ming is all true? Tyrion nodded gently and said nothing. Tiffany also looked, as if she had survived a calamity, and said, so, the Sun Star Plundering Group and the Moching Star Plundering Group of Palak have united. Then the two major Star Plundering Groups joined forces with the She people and the Lagrazan people to fight against Nkania in order to achieve the goal of redistributing the resources of Simu. In order to prevent all three great magicians of Nkania from being dispatched, some Star Plundering Groups were sent to attack Nkania in order to disperse Nkania's combat force deployment. In this way, the Star Plundering Group attacking Nkania became cannon fodder to die. Tiffany continued, and she personally recounted this huge interstellar event, which made Tiffany, who was only level 6, tremble in her voice, and looked at Tyrion with a timid look. Tyrion seemed much more natural at this moment. After glancing at the radar map on the console, he whispered, everything started because of the ruins of Io. We can't go to this muddy water. We will lose our lives if we are not careful. Yes, what Tyrion said is very true. Tiffany said repeatedly. While speaking, his eyes turned, as if he thought of something again. After a chuckle, he said, boss, otherwise, let's go first. This place is still unsafe. Tyrion's eyes turned, looked at Tiffany, nodded slightly, and said, okay, tell Troy to return to the original route according to the previously recorded coordinates. Yes. Tiffany agreed and walked quickly to the cab. At this time, Li Ming was riding a lifeboat across the sky, and had already entered the Simu Star. Li Ming had already marked the landing coordinates, so there was no need to operate more. The lifeboat would arrive at the destination according to the information marked in advance by Li Ming. From Pollock to Samu, the coordinates of the transmission area used by Li Ming were all searched from Friedman's brain. The same path, the same coordinates, so the final location is exactly the same. The only difference is the departure time. Of course, the landing point on Samu was also obtained from Friedman, and this coordinate position is extremely critical. It is one of the entrances to the Io ruins. After entering the Samu airspace, the lifeboat began to cruise and search for landing coordinates and landing points. During this period, the geographical environment of Samu also entered Li Ming's sight. This area is full of mountains and rocks, and overgrown with grass and trees. The beautiful natural landscape is in full view. I thought that such scenery could only be seen on Earth, but I didn't expect that there is also such scenery in the depths of space. This harmonious beauty is very different from the lush vegetation of Philistar. Philistar can be said to have an excess of vegetation. It is not only tall, but also accompanied by a strong heterogeneous atmosphere, like a fairy tale wonderland, beautiful but not real enough, making people feel insecure. This place is completely different. Everything is natural and peaceful, as if it should be so, which makes people intoxicated. While enjoying the beautiful scenery, Li Ming also carefully observed various subtleties. At present Samu Star was controlled by multiple forces, and had obvious regional divisions. Li Ming needed to be cautious enough. With such careful observation, the indicator screen of the lifeboat had already shown the target point, and the distance was very close. However, at this moment, in the distant sky, strange lights flashed, energy radiated, and accompanied by roaring sounds. Although it was far away, everything was clear. This strange phenomenon immediately attracted Li Ming's attention. He focused his eyes and looked in that direction with his consciousness. After such a careful look, Li Ming couldn't help but frowned and showed a puzzled look. The strange phenomenon was not formed naturally, but was caused by humans. Although it was impossible to distinguish clearly, several figures could be vaguely seen moving in the sky. It turned out that higher-level civilizations were fighting each other. What was more coincidental was that the direction where Li Ming's spacecraft was heading was close to there. Li Ming looked at the indicator screen and then at the place where the fight was, and he actually felt a little more worried. The huge and sensational fighting scene was obviously an 8th order or even higher civilization. With Li Ming's knowledge of the 7th order civilization, it was impossible to generate such a huge energy. Fortunately, these people were fighting with all their heart and did not care about the objects around them. Otherwise, a lifeboat like Li Ming would definitely be discovered. However, the coordinates of the lifeboat were located near the fight between those people, which made Li Ming think about it. It would be a bad idea to get too close. Maybe those people didn't care now. Once they got too close, they would definitely be discovered. If they got involved with it, it would be a big deal. Thinking of this, Li Ming started to operate the lifeboat again, temporarily cancelling the original target location and changing it to a mountain near the original location. The lifeboat received the command, and after a beeping sound, it relocated to a mountain full of boulders. After circling in the air for a while, the overall situation of the mountain had been checked. Then the spacecraft slowly landed and disappeared in the area between several boulders. This place is surrounded by huge rocks and is relatively hidden. It is difficult to find it if you don't get close and check it carefully. Li Ming got off the spaceship and came to a huge rock. He quickly used his consciousness to sense the surroundings, and then he felt relieved. However, when he looked up, he saw that the fight in the distance was still going on. With these people here, I'm afraid I can't go to that place for the time being. He whispered to himself and continued to stare at the sky. As he looked, Li Ming suddenly frowned. That person is Imogene? Li Ming's powerful eyes immediately recognized one of the familiar faces like a telescope, and he also watched with interest. There were 5 figures fighting in the air, and it was 2 against 3, and these 2 people were not at all inferior. The 2 people were Imogene and Nugent from Inkinaya, and the 3 people were Commander Odom of the 9th level civilization of Shixing, Commander Sima of the 9th level civilization of Lagrazan, and Solalia of the Mochang Star Raid group. As 9-level warriors, these 3 people are not weak in strength, but under this alliance mechanism, these 3 people will definitely not use their full strength. More importantly, there are differences in the cooperation among the 3 people, so they can only advance and retreat, and I retreat and advance. But Imogen and Nugent are completely different. Both of them are Inkinaya people, and they are also the top of the Inkinaya element clan. Not only do they have a tacit understanding with each other, but they also cooperate extremely well in offense and defense. Li Ming has never seen such a battle between high-level interstellar civilizations, not to mention that the one in front of him is the top 9-level civilization of the outer system, which makes Li Ming even more curious. Imogen holds a blue crystal block, which is half a foot long. The whole blue light flashes, and the chill is pressing. It is a high-level stardust weapon. Nugent did not use any stardust weapons, but he did have a blue armor on his body. The armor itself is black, but the surface is inlaid with a large number of small blue crystal blocks, and the crystal blocks are constantly flashing blue light, so it looks like blue. Commander Odom of Shixing was covered in metal armor and held a long sword in his hand, but the sword did not emit any powerful power, just like a sharp sword. It looked like this on the surface, but Li Ming knew that the weapons in the hands of high-level civilizations must have unique abilities, but there was no need to show them. Commander Seema of Ragrazan was also unarmed, and there was no armor on the surface of his body that looked abnormal, only ordinary cloaks and clothes. The only thing that was conspicuous was the muscles under his brown skin. This body was extremely strong, and seemed to be no less than those armors. Although Li Ming did not know these 4 people, he could roughly tell which star system they belonged to from their appearance and body shape, but Li Ming could not see any clues about the last alien. This alien was slender, with grey skin, and a close-fitting cloak made him look like an inverted flower, because the bottom of the cloak was an open circle with wavy patterns, which looked like petals. 2 grey arms were exposed, and the smaller head was vertically elongated, somewhat like a horse's head. Li Ming had never seen such a strange appearance before, and he didn't know what civilization it came from. But what was even stranger than these was the surface of its skin. The skin and flesh were not smooth, but granular like sand, as if it was an alien formed by the accumulation of grains of sand. This person was none other than the leader of the Mochang star raiding group, Zalalia. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Peace Talks. The 5 Ninth Order civilizations were fighting in the sky. Although none of them had used their full strength, the powerful energy fluctuations had resounded throughout the entire area, making it difficult for anyone to approach easily. You 3 have joined forces. You don't just want to fight like this today, do you? If you really want to fight, use your powerful means quickly, Imogen said after glancing at the 3 people on the opposite side. With that, the 3 of them stopped fighting, looked at each other and said nothing. What nonsense are you talking to these despicable people who have joined forces? Let me kill one first. Nugent shouted, as if he was ready to duel again. Without waiting for him to move again, Imogen waved his hand to block his way, winked, and then turned his eyes to the 3 people on the opposite side again. The 3 of them said nothing, and looked at each other, and no one was willing to step forward. Seeing this, Imogen couldn't help but chuckle twice, and continued, it seems that you are not willing to fight to the death. In the final analysis, it is for the benefit of Io ruins. We, Inkinaya, have never had anything to do with your galaxy or star raiders. We are here today for Io ruins. As for the distribution of interests in it, our struggle may not have any results. Why don't we discuss it? It would be best if we can reach a consensus. If we can't, we can continue to fight. What do you think? Imogen shook the crystal in his hand and said slowly. As soon as these words came out, the expressions of the 3 people opposite him also relaxed, and their tense postures relaxed slightly. They were very concerned about Imogen's proposal. Salalia glanced at the commander of Lagrasan, Seema, and at the same time, glanced at Odom of Shixing, whispering, this is a matter between your star systems. As long as you can reach an agreement, I don't care. Seema turned his head and looked at Odom, but he didn't say a word. Seeing this, Odom couldn't help but snorted, looked at Imogen in the distance, smiled slightly, and said, "Then please tell me, Grand Mage, how should we distribute it?" Imogen's eyes turned, and his fingers turned the blue crystal block. After thinking for a while, he said, "Since you let me talk, then I won't shirk my responsibility. We don't know what the situation is in the ruins of Io. If we enter it at our level, once we find something valuable, we will inevitably fight, and the result will be the same as now. So I suggest, none of us, the 9th level beings, are allowed to enter it, and let the disciples below go in and try. As for what they can find, it depends on their luck." Imogen said softly. As soon as this proposal was made, the three people had different expressions. Seema and Odom were relatively calm, and nodded slightly, as if they had no objection to it. However, as a Star Raider, Selalia showed a worried look. After looking at Seema and Odom, her eyes showed that she was thinking about something else. Seema and Odom are both the existences that dominate a civilization. In their systems, there are naturally disciples of the 8th level civilization or the 7th level civilization. The strongest people besides the 9th level civilization are definitely the first choice to enter the ruins of Io. But Selalia is different. As a Star Raider, her subordinates are also Star Raiders. It is the nature of Star Raiders to plunder and embezzle. Moreover, the subordinates who come from Star Raiders are different from disciples in the civilization system. They may turn against them and run away with the things. The ruins of Io, a higher level civilization, should be done personally, and the current situation is extremely unfavorable to Selalia. After weighing the pros and cons, Seema nodded to Odom. Odom also carefully considered the difference in interests and nodded lightly, without objection. But when the two looked at Selalia, they didn't know how to respond to Imogen. After all, they were also partners who had reached an alliance intention temporarily, so it was natural to ask for each other's opinions at this time. Selalia noticed the gazes of the two and blinked. After a flash of thought passed through her mind, she suddenly snorted. "As long as you two have discussed it properly, I naturally have no objection," Selalia said quickly, glancing fiercely into the distance, not taking these people seriously at all. After saying this, Odom looked at Imogen and replied, "Okay, then according to the Grand Mage's opinion, none of the 5 of us will participate in this operation, and let the people below enter." Hehe. Imogen chuckled twice, nodded slowly, and said, "Since this matter has been decided, there are a few points I need to make clear in advance. Although the real entrance to the ruins of Io is in our hands, there are still some loopholes in other places. I want to arrange our people and block all those who want to take advantage of the loopholes. In this way, there will be fewer unnecessary competitors. What do you think?" Imogen continued. As soon as the voice fell, Seema shouted directly, "Okay. I don't think it's necessary." Selalia's feminine voice suddenly came out, and this sentence also attracted everyone's attention. Being able to prevent more people from entering, it will invisibly increase the chances of finding good things for their own people. This is naturally what everyone wants to see, but Selalia is a little dissatisfied. Selalia stroked her clothes on her shoulders and continued, "If only the 5 of us don't participate, I can accept it, but I won't agree to block the loophole and prevent others from entering. Since none of us, the 9th rank ones, are going to participate, we don't need to ask about the ruins of Io anymore. We just need to wait for the result." Seema was about to say something, but he immediately shut his mouth again. It was obviously not appropriate to refute at this time. His eyes changed and looked at Imogen. Selalia's proposal can be said to be something that none of the 4 people in front of him were willing to accept, but Seema and Odom were originally in the same group with Selalia, so it was naturally inconvenient for them to lose their composure at this time. Imogen chuckled twice, nodded, and said, "It was my proposal to block the loophole. Who of you 3 has the final say?" Seema said no more, and couldn't help but look at Odom again, as if he wanted to hear his opinion. Odom looked nonchalant, chuckled a few times, and said, "I agree with Selalia's opinion. Since we have decided not to participate, there is no need to ask more questions. Let everything go with the flow." Odom's answer surprised Imogen a little. Obviously, this proposal was not feasible. Imogen didn't want to give up the situation that was finally negotiated. After thinking about it, he could only nod slightly. Well, good. In this case, let's not talk about the loophole. Next, everyone should make arrangements quickly. If someone enters through the loophole in advance, the good things inside will not be our turn. While speaking, Imogen glanced at Celia and at the same time turned around and flew to somewhere on the ground. Nugent also snorted and left. The remaining 3 people looked at each other and then dispersed. Li Ming, who was far away, saw all this. Although he couldn't hear what they were discussing, he couldn't help frowning as he watched these people disperse. We were fighting fiercely just now. How come it's over so quickly? We haven't even decided who won or lost. Li Ming muttered to himself, totally unaware of what had happened. It's better to disperse. I should also leave. Li Ming turned around and returned to the lifeboat and flew into the sky again. With a flick of his finger, he marked the previous coordinates again. Those 9th rank bosses were no longer in sight, so the area was naturally relatively safer. The spaceship flew low and flew quickly between the mountains and forests. Li Ming didn't know that there were 2 spaceships behind him in the distance. After a short flight, the spaceship slowly landed and an empty area appeared in front of him. There were dense jungles on both sides. The lifeboat landed on a pile of rubble, and there were still stone pillars in front of him, like big trees. After getting off the lifeboat, Li Ming walked towards the stone forest, based on the location in his memory. The area, coordinates, and memory were all stolen by Li Ming from Friedman. As long as he walked along the stone forest to the top, he would reach his destination. After a distance of several hundred meters, a vertical broken arm appeared in front of him. There were no stone pillars nearby, but there was a cave under the broken arm. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly as he looked at the cave in trance, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He whispered, "It seems that this is it." He took a few steps forward and came to the edge of the cave in trance. Just as he was about to enter, Li Ming's eyebrows suddenly tightened, and he looked back suddenly. "Who are you? How do you know this place?" An alien with a semicircular head appeared not far away and looked at Li Ming cautiously. This alien has a 7th level civilization and looks exactly like the same race as Friedman, the Moses. Chapter 157. Entering the ruins of Io. Li Ming immediately looked the other person up and down. His slightly narrowed eyes had already released his wisdom ability. Some information quickly emerged in his mind. Upon receiving this information, Li Ming immediately smiled knowingly. "Ice Male's idea was to let me come here," Li Ming said with a smile. But the alien on the opposite side still had a puzzled look on his face. He looked Li Ming up and down carefully, and his eyes were full of doubts. Seeing this, Li Ming continued, "Isn't it the information provided by Ice Male that allowed you, the 3 brothers, to find this place? The location and coordinates of this place? Without Ice Male, how could I have found it? I know you are waiting for Friedman and Frieda here. It doesn't matter. Since we have met, we will go in together later." Hearing what Li Ming said, the alien nodded slightly and muttered, "That's right. Without Lord Ice Male's coordinates, no one except the 3 of us brothers can find this place. Since you are also arranged by Lord Ice Male, it will be easy. When my 2 brothers come, the 4 of us will join forces and there will be nothing to worry about." Ha ha ha. Exactly. Li Ming laughed and walked towards the other party. Just after taking 2 steps, he suddenly raised his right hand and a green object flew out from his palm. This object was extremely fast, and the other party just happened to relax his vigilance against Li Ming, so the green object hit his chest with just a flash. With a muffled sound of bang, the fingertip-sized green object suddenly exploded, and a ball of green mist instantly wrapped around the opponent's body. When the green mist dissipated, a huge petal bit the skin on his chest like a big mouth, and at the same time, the tail of the petal released more than a dozen finger-thick vines. The vines were like flexible tentacles, and they had already wrapped around the opponent while dancing. At the same time, there was a sharp thorn at the top of the vine, and it was staring at every part of his body. "Fritz, Ice Male has handed this portal to me. I will enter the ruins of Io. You 3 brothers can rest." Li Ming smiled slightly and said so, while slowly raising his right hand. As his arm was raised, those sharp thorns also slowly leaned back, like a taut bowstring. As long as it was loosened, it would immediately pierce Fritz's body. No, impossible. You are talking nonsense, you. After Fritz finished speaking, Li Ming put down his right hand directly, and those vines and sharp thorns instantly pierced through Fritz's body like more than a dozen long swords. Li Ming didn't look at the other person anymore, and turned around. He walked quickly into the cave. The cave was not big, and the walls emitted a dim light. In the middle of the cave was a circular teleportation platform. Li Ming first carefully checked the surroundings with his eyes, and then used his consciousness to sense it in detail. After a satisfied smile, he stood on the teleportation platform. Energy was activated, and consciousness was operated. The entire teleportation platform suddenly flashed, and beams of light rose from the teleportation platform, as if the teleportation platform was shooting meteors upwards. Li Ming's figure was quickly submerged by these rising beams of light. TSK, TSK, TSK. The sound kept coming out. When Li Ming was completely covered by the light, the whole teleportation platform flashed with strong light, as if all the light beams merged together in an instant, and disappeared the next moment. Without any light, Li Ming's figure disappeared. There was only an empty teleportation platform left in the cave. At this time, two figures came to the cave entrance. They were Friedman and Frieda. As soon as they arrived at the cave entrance, they noticed the corpse on the ground. They walked forward and backward quickly, and their faces were pale. Fritz! Fritz! After Friedman shouted twice, he noticed the flower vines on the surface of the corpse, but now the flower vines have withered and shriveled, as if they were squeezed dry. It must be that guy Tyrann, Frieda said angrily, her eyes instantly fierce. Friedman slowly stood up, blinking his eyes, and after looking at the cave, he said, "It is impossible for Tyrann to kill Fritz alone. He must have done it together with his deputy captain. Let's go. Chase him and avenge Fritz," he shouted fiercely, and his figure hurried into the cave. After entering the cave and carefully checking around, the two of them directly boarded the transmission platform. At this time, Li Ming appeared next to a tall wall with a flash of light. The wall was made of bricks and stones, more than 4 meters high. The wall was seriously aged, and some bricks and stones fell off, leaving deep pits. The sky was a dazzling sun, and there were tall buildings in the distance. When Li Ming looked into the distance, he immediately opened his eyes wide, and showed a bit of disbelief. This is. High-rise buildings can be seen everywhere, and abandoned vehicles are still parked on both sides of the smooth road. This scene seemed to be back on Earth, very familiar, but when you look closely, you will immediately notice something unusual. Although the buildings of high-rise buildings are also made of bricks and stones, these bricks and stones reveal this weak energy, which is not on Earth. In addition, there are those vehicles. Although they look a bit like cars, the materials of the car bodies are all special metals, and they are also powered by energy. The picture is the same, but the reality is different. Another point is that this is not a beautiful and bright urban style, but an aging and long abandoned doomsday style. The eye-catching buildings and various facilities seem to have been baked by high temperatures, leaving serious signs of damage. There are no green plants, not even a blade of grass, and all you can see is corrosion and damage. The overall buildings and facilities have not been greatly damaged, and still maintain their original integrity. It's just that the surface has been abandoned for a long time, and has been exposed to the wind and sun, and it no longer has its original appearance. But looking at it as a whole, it seems like coming to the Earth at the end of the world. While checking, Li Ming took a step, and walked slowly inside. At the same time, a large number of aliens began to appear at the major entrances of the Io ruins. The large entrances are the main entrances controlled by various galaxies, and those entering these entrances are all 8th level civilizations and 7th level civilizations. In addition to these main entrances, some small entrances called loopholes also appeared. Many aliens, including fuller stars, Moses, etc. The star of Samu has a lot of energy resources, which is why all the star systems sent troops to this star. However, the ruins of Io are different. It is a place where there may be star records, technology, or high-value items left by advanced civilizations. Naturally, everyone wants to get a piece of this kind of place. Of course, some star raiders also have their own independent ways of entering, and different forces and different personnel are pouring in. Just near the high wall where Li Ming teleported, a strong light flashed, and two figures appeared. They were Friedman and Frida. As soon as they appeared, they looked around, as if looking for something. After confirming that there were no other people, the two looked at each other, and walked directly into the depths of the high-rise building. Among the tall buildings, there are crisscrossing streets. This abandoned ancient city is full of mystery and unknown. Li Ming walked carefully in a wider street. Li Ming has been walking along this street for half a day. At the end of the street is a weird building that does not match the high-rise building at all. This building is more than 20 meters long and wide. Compared with the surrounding high-rise buildings, it is not very big, but its appearance is particularly eye-catching. The hull is only more than 10 meters high, as if it is made of bronze. The exterior is bronze yellow, particularly eye-catching. It is precisely because this building is different from other buildings that it attracted Li Ming's attention. After a while, Li Ming's figure was already standing at the door of this building. Li Ming was cautious along the way, always alert to the surroundings. Although he was a little slow, he did not find anything unusual. When he got closer, the uniqueness of this building was truly revealed. It is divided into 2 floors. There are 4 thick pillars at the door of the first floor, and the main door is just an empty doorway, as if there is no main door. The second floor is full of round windows, as dense as honeycomb coal. At first glance, it seems like a temple. Li Ming was so cautious that it took him half a day to reach the door, but on the top of a tall building in the distance, 2 figures were already staring at Li Ming. It turns out that standing high is useful. We found this guy so quickly, Friedman said proudly, but his fierce eyes had revealed murderous intent. What are we waiting for? Let's do it. Frida moved, looking anxious to do it, but her figure was pressed back by Friedman as soon as she moved. Friedman glanced at Frida and said, "Don't worry, this guy is just Tyran's vice captain. Tyran hasn't shown up yet. If we go up now, it will be difficult if we are attacked from both sides by Tyran." Frida nodded slightly, and just as she was about to say something, a figure really appeared near Li Ming. It appeared. Frida said softly, and looked there more carefully. Chapter 158, Double Attack, Power Civilization. Li Ming raised his footsteps and prepared to enter the bronze building, but just as he raised his footsteps, a slight noise suddenly occurred not far behind him. "This place belongs to me. If you don't want to die, get out of here." A rude voice came from behind. Li Ming was startled when he heard this, and his body turned around. His face suddenly changed slightly when his consciousness sensed it. In front of Li Ming was a bull-headed alien, wearing black armor, holding a strange axe in his hand, with a strong body and a fierce expression. Such an appearance is exactly that of a Lagrazan. But more importantly, this Lagrazan is actually an 8th level civilization. Li Ming frowned slightly, with a worried look on his face, and looked at the other party cautiously. Not only Li Ming, but also Friedman and Frida on the tall building in the distance noticed this. This person is Laird. Yes, it's him, Lagrazan, warrior, Laird. Friedman and Frida both recognized this 8th level civilization that had just appeared, and each showed a look of fear. Although the distance was far, they still looked at each other timidly, and wanted to leave. "Brother, what should we do?" Frida looked at Friedman and asked tremblingly. Friedman nodded slightly, muttering, "Yeah, what should we do?" After a little thought, Friedman continued to look into the distance and continued, "It's okay. Laird won't find us from such a distance. We must make sure that guy is killed. This is also like watching others avenge us." "Okay," Frida replied, and the two of them lowered their figures and carefully watched any actions in the distance. At this time, Li Ming did not move. Facing an 8th level civilization, Li Ming did not show too much fear. Although he was a little nervous, his expression was still calm. Li Ming could estimate the strength of his opponent. The estimation here was not a strict calculation, but the induction under the wisdom consciousness. For ordinary 7th level civilizations, Li Ming could see through their thoughts at will, and see what he wanted from the other party's brain. Although Li Ming could not completely see through the thoughts in the 8th level civilization in front of him, he could still perceive some of it vaguely. This was absolutely impossible before, but Li Ming who was already at the 7th level of civilization, had repeatedly practiced all the star accords to the limit of this level in the decomposition chamber, and his ability was naturally greatly improved. The ability of the wisdom eye to detect the other party's thoughts, even if it was only a part, was extremely important to Li Ming. With this foundation, Li Ming was not too worried. HMPH, are you not afraid of death? Laird snorted coldly, and his right hand tightly grasped the strange axe. Without waiting for the other party to do anything more, Li Ming's right hand did the same, and a grey light flashed from the palm of his hand, and a long sword appeared. It was Hulang. Seeing this, Laird narrowed his eyes slightly, raised the corners of his mouth, and revealed a disdainful smile. His open mouth revealed a row of sharp fangs, and the disdainful voice was uttered again. Interesting. It seems that you, an alien of unknown origin, still have misunderstandings about the classification of levels. Li Ming's mind was concentrated, and all his attention was focused on the other party, and he was determined to fight. Ahem. Sure. Are you challenging a high-level civilization? But according to my estimate, your chance of winning is as high as 65%, which is pretty good. Moore's consciousness was transmitted from the cloak to Li Ming's brain. Hearing this guy's voice at this time made Li Ming feel a little surprised, but he didn't care. Friedman, who was also paying attention to this direction, shrank back, his eyes wide open, and he couldn't believe what he saw. Is this guy crazy? He actually took the initiative to show his weapon in front of a high-level civilization. Friedman said in astonishment, with more disdain under his trembling voice. It seems that he is dead this time. Frieda also said. As they said this, the two seemed to be more curious about this battle between low and high. Although they saw the winner, they couldn't help but watch it intently. Laird was a little surprised, and after a light laugh, his figure suddenly moved and ran straight towards Li Ming. With this movement, a strange scene appeared. Laird's body was as fast as an arrow and lightning. In a blink of an eye, he was in front of Li Ming. At the same time, the strange axe also chopped down. Even if Li Ming knew in advance, he could not dodge at such a speed. He could only raise the grey dragon in his hand to block it. Dang, a metal collision sounded. The Slagarazan people are indeed a civilization of power. The powerful force and impact are like a train hitting him. When Li Ming used his weapon to catch this attack, he immediately regretted it. His body leaned back, his hands were numb, and he was almost knocked out. But when Li Ming took a closer look, he immediately opened his mouth and let out a sound of ah, and frowned, unable to believe it. Although Laird's body attacked with an axe, there was still a phantom in the distance, where Laird had stood before. Just when Li Ming was puzzled, the phantom repeated the action of the body, and chopped up again. The phantom just repeated Laird's physical movements and eventually merged with Laird's body. It seemed to be just a phantom, but the powerful impact force appeared again. At the moment, when the phantom returned to Laird's body, Li Ming could no longer withstand the powerful force. It was as if another train hit him, and his body flew out directly. With a muffled bang, Li Ming's body hit a building in the distance. The bricks and stones of the building, which had already been corroded, instantly shattered. Dust and smoke rose up, and Li Ming's figure had completely disappeared. Damn, this attack. Li Ming stood up again, and was already lying in the broken bricks and tiles. When the dust and smoke dissipated, Li Ming's figure reappeared, and he had not suffered any substantial damage. Looking at Laird in the distance, Li Ming immediately understood, narrowed his eyes slightly, and waved his hand to collect Hulang. Laird was somewhat surprised by Li Ming's action. He snorted and said, "Have you given up struggling? But, you will still die." Li Ming smiled lightly and replied, "No, I don't need any weapons to deal with you." Huh. What a big mouth. As he spoke, Laird raised his axe and prepared to attack again. Li Ming's eyes were focused, and his wisdom ability was activated. At the same time, a green shadow began to appear on his body. This shadow was stimulated by the wisdom ability. At the moment the shadow appeared, Laird's attack was repeated. Single attack, double strength, that is a power that ordinary people cannot resist, not to mention that the opponent is a power civilization. If you fight with this civilization in close combat, you will definitely be insufficient. Thinking and consciousness made Li Ming quickly understand how he should deal with the opponent. Like his arms, his cloak shook up. The suddenly opened cloak was full of patterns of all kinds, densely packed with images of various animals. Looking at the surface, it seemed to be just a cloak with many patterns, but the next moment, a group of white birds flew out from the pattern. The birds were the size of sparrows, snow white in color, with arcs jumping between their feathers. They were the thunderbirds. This badge was obtained from the beast taming tribe. There were more than a dozen snow white birds, flapping their wings together and swooping towards Laird. Chapter 159. Alien friends, it's time to go to bed. Before Laird could react, the group of thunderbirds were close to him. Then, there were bang 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 sounds, and the thunderbirds exploded like grenades. Each explosion was accompanied by a dazzling white light, and a strong electric current hit Laird's body. Crackle was like setting off firecrackers. White light flashed, thunder roared, and Laird was swallowed up in the blink of an eye. When the sound faded, and the thunderbirds disappeared, Laird slowly lowered his arms, that were blocking his face. His face was full of anger. The dozen thunderbirds seemed to be moving violently, but they only caused blue smoke to rise from Laird's armor, and his body was not injured at all. Taming, Laird said viciously, but when he looked around, he saw a shadow slowly walking out of the ruins, where the dust and smoke had dissipated. Li Ming's body was wrapped in green light, as if burning with green flames, but the light was dim. Outside the green light was a huge grey shadow, 4 or 5 meters high. Overall, the grey shadow wrapped the cyan shadow, and the cyan shadow wrapped Li Ming. The cyan shadow was smaller, only slightly larger than Li Ming's body, which was the wisdom eye ability. The grey shadow was the high-level ability of the Death Medicine clan, Poison Mist. When Laird saw the shadow, his face changed slightly, and he whispered, "It's not animal taming. This Poison Mist, is it a death medicine?" Just when Laird was unsure of Li Ming's ability, Li Ming had already started to attack. His eyes suddenly widened a little, and his arm stretched out. Along with the arm, the cyan shadow on the surface of his body stretched out, as if the shadow was Li Ming's arm. A green light flashed, and a long green light stretched out from the shadow. The green light was like an elongated arm, stretching directly from the grey poison mist, and heading straight for Laird. Laird was slightly startled, and quickly raised the strange axe in his hand to block it, but the next moment Laird's eyes widened a little. The green shadow arm was not restricted by physics, and pierced through the strange axe, and went directly into Laird's bull head. Laird was very surprised, and when he looked at Li Ming, the other party was already proud. The palm formed by the green shadow was like the devil's death hand, and it grabbed Laird's brain tightly, as if it had grabbed the other party's soul. What's going on? This guy. Laird was shocked, and his body suddenly froze, as if his soul trembled in his body. His vision blurred, and everything he saw was a double image. The soul naturally does not exist, but the consciousness has been invaded by Li Ming. The green shadow is like a psychedelic poison, corroding the other party's consciousness bit by bit, interfering with the other party's thinking, and stealing the information in the other party's brain. His body shook involuntarily, and Laird showed a painful expression. The pain of being forcibly invaded in the brain has slowly emerged. The consciousness strength of the 8th level civilization is naturally higher than that of the 7th level. If it is not voluntary, even spiritual civilization will find it difficult to invade. However, all this has changed in Li Ming. While using the wisdom eye ability, the golden water droplets in his brain have been integrated into it, making the already powerful wisdom eye even more powerful. The golden water droplets are what Li Ming has obtained by practicing a whole page of the 6 domain star book. At this time, the shadow of golden water droplets began to appear in Li Ming's eyes. The original black eyeballs were replaced by golden water droplets, which was extremely strange. How is it possible? This mental power. Laird just thought of something in his mind, and immediately felt a kind of pain. The strange axe in his hand suddenly fell to the ground. He held his head with both hands, and his vision became more and more blurred. Li Ming raised his mouth, and showed a satisfied smile. At the same time, the outermost grey poisonous fog expanded and rushed straight to Laird. The poisonous fog surged from around Li Ming's body like a dark cloud, instantly submerging Laird. Laird was already unable to control himself under the erosion of the green light phantom, and now the poisonous fog eroded his body, and his body instantly became weak. Plop. Laird's figure knelt on the ground. His breathing became more tight, and he began to cough, which was the effect of the poisonous fog. In the hazy eyes, everything was sometimes clear and sometimes blurry. He raised his head slightly and saw a figure standing in front of him. Laird used all his strength to look at the other person's face. It was Li Ming. In the blurred vision, Li Ming raised his left hand and threw a small green thing over. His mouth opened and closed, as if he was saying something, but Laird could no longer hear any sound. He only felt that someone was grabbing his brain and holding it tightly, which was painful. "Alien friend, it's time to go to bed," Li Ming said calmly, and what he threw out with his left hand was a green seed. Bang! With a muffled sound, the green seed exploded instantly, and a cloud of green mist gushed out. Then, vines twisted and crawled out like snakes, and each vine had a sharp thorn on its top. In a fuzzy consciousness, Laird felt as if his body was pierced by something. His eyes were round, his mouth opened a little wider, and blood slowly gushed out of his mouth. "Ah!" a low voice followed. Plop. A few seconds later, Laird was no longer moving and had died. The green light and poisonous mist slowly faded away, and everything returned to calm. Looking at Laird, who was dead on the ground, Li Ming smiled slightly and squatted down at the same time. After a while of groping, he found 5 star bags on Laird's body. Looking at the star bag in his hand, Li Ming was not in a hurry to check what was inside. He clenched his palm and put the star bag away. At the same time, his eyes turned and looked at the strange axe. "Level 5 stardust weapon," Li Ming whispered, and then he moved his hand. A star capsule appeared. A blue light flashed, and the strange axe disappeared. It was stored in the star capsule. After doing all this, Li Ming stood up. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly felt something strange. He turned his head and looked directly at a rooftop in the distance. The rooftop was empty, with nothing. Li Ming looked around the surrounding buildings again. There was indeed no movement. Then he turned and walked into the bronze building. Friedman and Frida, who were far away on the top of the tall building, had already squatted under the balcony. Their faces were pale, their muscles were trembling, and drops of sweat kept dripping down their foreheads. They were breathing rapidly. Did he find us?" Frida looked at Friedman nervously, with fear and worry written all over her face. Friedman kept shaking his head. His eyes were full of distraction, and he opened his mouth and whispered, "I don't know. I don't know. What should we do now?" Frida grabbed Friedman's arm with one hand, urgently needing him to give an answer. Friedman answered almost without thinking, Go quickly, leave here quickly." In the trembling voice, Friedman didn't want to stay here for a second. He slowly stood up and walked away. Frida didn't dare to stay at all, and followed closely behind him. As for revenge, the two had already forgotten about it, and no one dared to mention it. Li Ming didn't know the existence of these two people. After taking a few steps, he had entered the building. The light inside was dim and dark, but the area was huge and relatively empty. There was a facility similar to a service desk at the entrance, but it was empty, with only tables and chairs left, and not even a hair. The service desk is further away from the lobby and the window. It seems like an office, just like a public institution, but it is also empty. All you can see are tables and chairs or empty rooms and walls. Li Ming looked around and confirmed that there was nothing. Then his eyes stopped at a staircase, which led to the second floor. After hesitating for a while, Li Ming walked up the stairs. Soon, the second floor was in full view. The entire second floor was like a classroom. The farthest part was the podium and the screen, and the rest were tables and chairs. There was nothing else. Li Ming was somewhat disappointed to see this. He thought he would gain something from it, but it was just an empty building. He sighed slightly, unable to hide his disappointment. However, as he turned his eyes, the screen on the podium in the distance caught Li Ming's attention. Noticing something strange, Li Ming took a few quick steps to the front of the screen. He looked intently and saw the screen flashing. Some of the information that had appeared on the screen began to flash again in Li Ming's mind. Li Ming couldn't help but take a breath, narrowed his eyes, and said to himself, "This is Chapter 160, Lower City Area, Huge Building." Li Ming carefully sensed the previous use of this screen, and the information on it was also reappeared in his mind bit by bit. This information made Li Ming's expression complicated and indescribable. He could only close his eyes slightly and experience it carefully. According to the content that was recorded on the screen, this Io ruins did have an advanced civilization, but this civilization began to choose to evacuate for an unknown reason. The screen recorded in detail the evacuation plan of the Io ruins area. The Io ruins is just a very small place on the star Simu. The screen only recorded the evacuation work of this small area, and there was no other content. There are 3 urban areas in the Io ruins, the upper, middle and lower areas. The upper urban area is exactly where Li Ming is now. It is the first area to evacuate, so it is orderly and comprehensive. This is also the same phenomenon that Li Ming saw. All items are packed up very cleanly, and it seems that they are not in a hurry to leave. The middle urban area is the second area to be evacuated, but unlike the upper urban area, there was a certain riot, and the arrangement work was obstructed and difficult to a certain extent. The lower urban area is even more chaotic, and it is almost evacuated in a hurry. According to the records, because the evacuation of the lower city was urgent, many items were not taken away in time, which was completely opposite to the upper city. Looking at these contents, Li Ming's eyes slowly opened, revealing a puzzled look. This Simu star doesn't look like a place where a huge disaster occurred, and the resources are so rich. Why leave? Li Ming couldn't understand, and the screen in front of him couldn't give Li Ming an answer. However, Li Ming was just slightly curious about these things, and didn't care too much, but when he thought of the lower city, Li Ming immediately became interested. Even if there are leftover items, they can only be in the lower city. Thinking of this, Li Ming carefully observed the map of the entire Io ruins, and at the same time, focused on the location of the lower city and the public facilities in the lower city. High-level civilizations generally exist in the public facilities of the civilization, such as troops, military facilities, etc. This kind of place is often the place where the civilization's heritage and capabilities are displayed. After confirming the location and area, Li Ming did not stay, turned around, and left quickly. Walking from south to north is the path to the lower city, and on the way, you have to pass through the central city. As soon as you enter the central city, the environment has changed a little. Scattered items can be seen everywhere on the streets, which are left behind during the hasty evacuation. Li Ming has recorded important military facilities, which are important search locations, but Li Ming is not very interested in the central city. According to the information he has, the most likely place to search is the military facilities in the lower city. As Li Ming was walking, a yawn was heard from his chest. Mer stretched out his wings, as if he had just woken up, and a small head popped out from Li Ming's chest. After looking around, he said drowsily, "So fast? Did you deal with that guy?" Li Ming ignored him and continued walking. At the same time, he seemed to think of something. After looking down at his chest, he said, "Didn't you say you wanted to evolve? Why don't I see any changes in you? TSK, what do you know?" Mer flapped his wings and said disdainfully, "The evolution of star beasts is an internal evolution. The appearance is determined by nature. Only in an emergency will it stimulate genetic changes, but that requires a powerful force to stimulate. Forget it, you won't understand, even if I tell you." Li Ming listened intentionally or unintentionally, but he couldn't help but think of a certain picture in his mind, and thought to himself, evolution? So familiar. Could it be the evolution of Pikachu? The cartoon from that year has come true. Thinking of this, Li Ming shook his head lightly, and didn't take it too seriously. Without stopping, he continued to walk deeper. The surrounding environment also began to undergo major changes. The scene in front of him was in a mess, like a ruin. High-rise buildings became rare, and there were more low-rise buildings. In the middle, and on both sides of the road, there were other facilities besides abandoned vehicles. I couldn't understand the purpose of these things, but they felt like the debris of a human world. Most of them were pieces of strange meteorites, but these meteorites did not look particularly hard, but the surface was very smooth. Lower city. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and looked into the distance. A huge and unique building had appeared. This building was in the shape of a tower, 100 meters high, with a strange architectural style. Although it was 100 meters high, it gave people the feeling that it had only 7 floors. From a visual point of view, this building was divided into 7 sections. The bottom floor was 200 meters long and wide, and more than 20 meters high. I didn't know what was going on inside, but according to the information Li Ming had, the building was a military stronghold, and it was also located in the lower city, which could be said to be the place where high-value items were most likely to exist. However, such a tall building was too conspicuous, and would definitely attract other people who entered the ruins. Without further ado, the earlier you enter, the more likely you are to find good things first. Thinking of this, Li Ming quickened his pace. But just after taking a few steps, Li Ming suddenly stopped. He saw 2 figures running out of the building's gate in a hurry. The 2 aliens looked like some kind of plants. They were the Florentines from Fuller Star. The 2 looked panicked and hurried, as if they were running for their lives, as if there was something terrifying in the house. However, the 2 Fuller Star people were not simple either. One was from the 8th order civilization and the other from the 7th order civilization. Li Ming's body swayed. While the 2 hadn't discovered him yet, he dodged and hid on the side of a building. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, 8th order civilizations are so scared? Li Ming shook his head slightly, unable to figure out the reason. He looked up and saw that the building next to him was about 5 floors and more than 10 meters high. He jumped and flew to the top of the building. He walked to the edge of the building and looked at the direction of the building again. Ah! A howl came from the inside of the gate. The sound was like a ghost. As soon as it entered his ears, he felt his heart tremble and his hair stand on end. Li Ming couldn't help but be stunned. Plop, a corpse flew out from the gate. This corpse was also a Fuller Star. The body was covered with torn wounds. Looking at the door, it was pitch black inside. A shadow shrank back from the door. Looking at the corpse in front of him, the Fuller Star of the 8th level civilization couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Obviously, there was an unknown wild beast in the first floor of this building, but this wild beast had no intention of coming out, and no one knew why. The 2 Fuller Star looked around and didn't dare to stay any longer. They turned around and left the place directly. At this time, Li Ming became even more curious. He touched his chin with one hand and took a deep breath. So, we can't go to this building? Just as Li Ming was talking to himself, the 2 Florians suddenly came back again. Li Ming leaned over and looked carefully. He saw that in the distance, there were many more people besides the 2 Florians. At a glance, there were as many as 8 people, and these 8 people had different appearances, and were from civilizations in different galaxies, but at this moment, they were all gathered together. Such a strange phenomenon attracted Li Ming's attention even more. He stared at it with his eyes and slowly let go of his consciousness, wanting to see clearly what happened. Chief Abast, are you giving up now? An alien with a semicircular head spoke first and laughed softly. Abast, the leader of the alien race on Fuller Star, looked at the person who was speaking, snorted, and said, "It turns out to be Brother Ismail." Having said that, Abast glanced at the other people, frowned slightly, and said, "It seems that everyone who will enter the Io ruins this time is gathered." Behind Ismail, in addition to Israel, there are also the Lagrazans, the Shixing people, and the Incanayas, with 2 people from each race, which is exactly the 8 people that Li Ming saw. An 8th level civilization among the Shixing people stood up first and said, "Don't get me wrong, Patriarch Abast. We gathered together to deal with the wild beast inside. The level of this wild beast is unknown, and its strength is powerful. If we don't work together to destroy it, no one can enter this building. Since we have encountered it, don't you plan to join us?" Abast narrowed his eyes, looked at the people in front of him, chuckled twice, and said, "I appreciate the kindness of Lieutenant Colonel Sage, but I won't participate this time. Since you have joined forces, you can enter. Can you make way for us?" Shixing person Sage didn't care too much. His eyes turned and looked at the others. "Since Patriarch Abast is unwilling to deal with this wild beast together, then we won't force it. Just make way for us." After a little thought, Israel took the lead in making way, and the others seemed to have no objection. They stood aside and made way for us. After taking a glance at these people, Abast snorted coldly and quickly left with the 7th level Grand Mentor beside him. Chapter 161, Sneaking In. After getting away from the crowd, the 7th level mentor breathed a sigh of relief. After looking at Abasta beside him, he whispered, "Patriarch, why did you have to ask them to move aside just now? Wouldn't it be better for us to avoid them?" "Humph. What do you know? These people are the leaders of a faction. As the Patriarch of Fullstar, if I avoid them, wouldn't it make us Fullstar look inferior?" Abasta said unhappily, but his feet quickened his pace. At the entrance of the giant building, 8 8th level civilizations each set up their formations. After Israel looked at Ismail beside him, he turned his gaze to the others and said, "This wild beast is extremely fierce. It is only here in the entire Io ruins, so I think this wild beast is a wild beast left by the advanced civilization of this ruins, just to protect this building. Once this wild beast is killed, the items in the building can be divided equally among us," Israel said confidently. Lagraz and General Lexami then snorted and said, "It's better to do as you said. By the way, I would like to remind everyone that we must do our best to deal with this wild beast. As long as the wild beast is not dead, none of us can get in. Even if we sneak in and get some treasure, it is impossible to get out if the wild beast is alive." Lexami's implication has been made very clear. He is advising everyone not to take advantage of the opportunity to sneak in when the wild beast is being surrounded and killed. Otherwise, not only will the wild beast not be killed, but the people who go in will not be able to get out. They are all 8th level civilizations, so they naturally understand what it means. Shixingra Seiki then stood up again. "Okay, let's not talk nonsense, let's do it." Li Ming in the distance has vaguely understood something. These guys who have been temporarily organized are just to surround and kill the wild beast. Since they can organize so many 8th level civilizations to deal with a wild beast, it is obvious that they have suffered from this wild beast, otherwise they would not easily gather together. After all, these people belong to different forces. Another roar was heard. This sudden roar interrupted Li Ming's train of thought. His body could not help but shrink. He looked closely and saw a wild beast staggering out of the door of the building. Not only Li Ming, but also the 8 8th level civilizations were stunned. Before they could make a move, the wild beast had already walked out. This beast was more than 2 meters tall, with a dark body and a faint glow, as if it was covered with scales. It had a long tail behind its buttocks, short forelimbs and long hind limbs. It roughly looked like a kangaroo, but its head was flat and round, and its mouth was full of sharp white teeth, like blades. Before Li Ming could do anything, More on his chest suddenly asked a question, his expression slightly solemn. Li Ming immediately lowered his head and looked at More, waiting for him to continue speaking. More touched his chin with his wings and muttered, "This guy looks really cool." Li Ming's originally tense nerves suddenly relaxed. He looked at More with gritted teeth and cursed inwardly, "Your uncle." More narrowed his eyes slightly, his expression was still serious, and said, "The pet of the Tizawi people." As he said so, More looked at the surrounding buildings, and then focused his attention on the giant building. He closed his eyes slightly and said, "The remains of the Tizawi people. It seems that the geocentric civilization once lived here." Li Ming said nothing, but he listened carefully to More's words. 2 important words were also deeply remembered by Li Ming. One was the Tizawi people and the other was the geocentric civilization. These were things beyond Li Ming's cognition, and sounded out of reach. More did not elaborate. After looking at the wild beast for a few more times, he retracted his body again. Li Ming looked at a loss, but did not ask in detail. Just as he was about to look in the direction of the building, he heard a roar suddenly. The battle to kill the wild beast had begun. Ismail and Israel are both Macidians, belonging to the intelligent civilization. Together with the 2 Inquinas, who are also from the intelligent civilization, there are 4 intelligent civilizations in total. Intelligent civilizations are not good at close combat, and different races have completely different abilities. Although these 4 are from the same civilization, their different races lead to completely different abilities. The 2 Inquinas are from the element tribe, and the abilities they use are similar to those of Imogene, both of which are ice. Li Ming couldn't quite understand the abilities of the Ismail brothers, but he saw the light flashing in the hands of the 2 men, and the energy fluctuations continued to spread, and their power was no less than that of the 2 men from Inquinas. The Shixing people and Lagrazan are both close combat masters, and their powerful 8th level abilities are fully revealed. Li Ming stood on a high place and saw clearly with his eyes. Although this wild beast was extremely fierce, it was unable to deal with 8 8th level civilizations. Various attack moves followed one after another, either close combat or long range, and the abilities of all major civilizations were exhausted to the extreme. Various streams of light flashed continuously, and the painting style was very much like the game world. However, Li Ming, who was immersed in the scene, knew clearly that these seemingly incredible fights were the embodiment of the development of alien civilization. If it were placed on Earth, this wild beast would be enough to destroy humanity. Compared with the energy utilization of aliens, human missiles and various weapons are still far behind, and are also restricted by various conditions. They are not at the same level at all. This scale of battle was also the first time Li Ming had seen it since entering the alien world. His mind was attracted. While watching, Li Ming's eyes inadvertently glanced at the door of the building. The wild beast was entangled with the 8 people. Although the wild beast was not as powerful as the 8 people, it could not be killed in a short time. At this time, the door of the building was empty, without a single figure. Li Ming touched his chin with one hand and said to himself, "This is an opportunity." Thinking of this, Li Ming's figure slowly retreated and disappeared on the roof. At the entrance of the palace, the wild beast jumped around and kept changing its attack targets, while it kept making roaring roars. It was already violent under the siege of everyone. Looking at the wild beast in this state, Israel smiled coldly and said, "This wild beast can no longer hold on. Everyone must not relax." Although the others did not say a word, they also understood this truth and used their own means to attack the wild beast with all their strength. Just as everyone was attacking together, Li Ming's figure flashed and appeared on the side of the giant building. At the same time, a green light flashed in his hand, and a light spot similar to a green leaf appeared. This thing was the portal that Li Ming took away on Mars. When he entered Brian's demon cave, Li Ming arranged one in advance, but later the situation was urgent, and he did not have time to use it. At this time, arranging such a portal outside was just in case. After arranging the portal, Li Ming's eyes continued to look at the battle situation in the distance. Seeing that everyone was stalemate and could not be separated for a while, Li Ming's eyes could not help but look at the entrance of the building. This building is relatively closed. Except for the main entrance, other holes are not big enough for people to enter. Now is the best time. He followed the shadow and ran to the cave entrance at a fast pace. He ran as fast as possible to avoid being discovered by those 8th level civilizations. However, Li Ming still underestimated the strength of the 8th level civilization. When he was halfway through, Ice Male had already noticed him and shouted, "Who is it? Are you going to die?" Li Ming paused when he heard the voice, but he was only stunned for a moment. He stopped for less than a second and continued to run. Seeing Li Ming enter the building, these people were helpless and could only worry. In this way, they were inevitably distracted. After all, they worked hard to deal with the wild beasts for a long time, but they made wedding clothes for others. Israel's eyes moved slightly, and he glanced at everyone. After a slight snort, he said, "Don't worry, everyone. Didn't you sense it? That person is only a 7th level civilization. When we subdue this beast, is there any chance for him to survive?" As soon as these words came out, it was as if everyone was given a shot of tranquilizer, which calmed their minds a little. After all, Li Ming's 7th level civilization aura could be seen at a glance in front of the 8th level civilization. So, after thinking about it, after the wild beast was dealt with, a small 7th level civilization would be easy to capture. Thinking of this, the 8 people entered the fierce battle again. The wild beast was already covered with wounds and could not hold on. At this time, they could not give up, and all kinds of tricks were used together again. The fight outside was still fierce, but Li Ming, who entered the building, ignored it, looked around with his eyes, and opened his consciousness. Carefully check all the items here. The structure inside was just as Li Ming guessed. The first floor was nearly 20 meters high. There were not many items in the empty room. It was as if he had entered a palace with no visible top. There was a striped stone pillar every 10 meters. Looking up along the stone pillar, it was pitch black. making people feel that the top of their heads was empty. Under his feet were pieces of stone slabs, each of which was 4 or 5 meters long and wide. The gloomy atmosphere enveloped the surroundings, making people extremely uncomfortable. Li Ming walked in carefully sensing the breath around him, fearing that there would be other wild beasts. He walked in the middle of 2 rows of giant stone pillars and stopped only after he reached the middle of the palace. There were no stone pillars in the middle of the palace, like a square. At the same time, there was a spiral staircase next to the left and right walls. Li Ming looked up along the stairs and saw the darkness leading to the top. After confirming all around and on both sides, Li Ming still chose the stairs on the left. There was no object on this floor except the stone pillars. It was empty. Li Ming could only choose to go to the second floor to check. Walking up the spiral staircase, one circle after another, soon, a 2-meter wide gate appeared. Li Ming smiled slightly and looked up to see that the tops of the stone pillars were black and the roof was also black. No wonder it was pitch black when looking up from below. It turned out that the stone pillars and the roof were black, but after careful sensing, this black area actually had a lot of energy, which was completely different from the part below. Li Ming frowned slightly, not knowing the reason, but continued to walk up without stopping. After a while, Li Ming's figure was already standing at the entrance of the stairs on the second floor. Looking around, the scene on the second floor was in full view. The space on the second floor was a whole circle smaller this time, but a large number of items were placed. The shelves were placed close to the wall. Although they had been cleaned up, there were still some things scattered on them. Then there were 4 huge metal containers in the middle. These containers looked a bit like gourds, but not completely. Some of them had display screens on them, and some had various strange characters on them. After Li Ming carefully examined the 4 huge objects, he was puzzled, and then he slowly walked over to see what was going on. As he approached the object, Li Ming suddenly sensed the energy contained in it, and he was particularly familiar with this energy. A thought quickly flashed through his mind. Could it be an alchemy furnace? Chapter 162, Geocentric Civilization. Li Ming had used the nebula cauldron before, and he also had the flowing cloud cauldron in his hand. The energy in these 2 pieces of equipment was basically the same, and the huge object in front of him also contained that kind of energy, which gave Li Ming the idea of an alchemy furnace. However, Li Ming had never seen such a huge alchemy equipment before, and he couldn't understand it. Just as Li Ming was puzzled, there was a sudden movement in his chest, and more crawled out from inside. Li Ming raised his arm and put Mer on his shoulder. After looking at the little guy, he suddenly thought of something and said, "Are these things also the masterpieces of the Tiszawi people?" Mer nodded slightly and said, "Of course." Li Ming smiled and touched his chin. After a light hum, he said, "It seems that you know a lot. Why don't you tell me more, so that I can increase my knowledge?" Mer's head turned and looked at Li Ming in surprise. After coughing twice, he said, "Since you are so humble, I will reluctantly tell you something. The Tiszawi people belong to the geocentric civilization, which is one of the oldest civilizations. It originated earlier than any current civilization. You can see their shadows in all the known civilized worlds. Of course, they are also very mysterious. Only a very small number of advanced civilizations have information about them. However, the higher the level of civilization, the more mysterious they are. Almost no one has ever seen what they look like. It is said that they are extremely powerful and rarely do anything themselves. Most of them use wild beasts or other races as subordinates to fight. For example, the wild beast on the first floor is a pet they raise. Moore said proudly, with a condescending look. Li Ming also listened carefully, as if he had heard the origin of human civilization. If the emergence of writing is taken as the beginning, then human civilization has been around for 7 or 8,000 years. If evolution has gotten rid of the inherent barbarism of animals and established a fair rule-based society with wisdom, then there are millions of years of civilization. However, up to now, the level of human civilization is still not comparable to these alien civilizations. Alien civilizations are diverse and more profound. Li Ming is not in the mood to think about these things now. He glanced at these huge equipment and whispered, "Then these things." Moore looked at the huge objects in front of him and continued, "These things should be used to refine elixirs." Li Ming closed his eyes in disdain and said, "Nonsense, of course I know this. What's your attitude? Are you humbly asking me for advice?" Mo suddenly opened his mouth, and his sharp voice made Li Ming's eardrums buzz. Could it be that he was in pain? Ah. As soon as Mo's voice ended, a miserable howl came from outside the building. Such a miserable cry made Li Ming and Mo still their bodies. It seems that the wild beast has been killed by those 8 people. Let's go quickly, Li Ming said as he walked quickly to the depths of the second floor. At this time, outside the huge building, the Shixing Manseki held a long sword stuck in the ground and said, "Finally done." The long sword pierced the wild beast's head and inserted into the hard ground like a nail. Seiki stepped on the wild beast's head and pulled out the long sword with his arm. Ice Meal in the distance slowly retracted his energy, rolled his eyes, looked at Israel beside him, and whispered, "Do we start now?" Israel shook his head slightly and replied, "There may not be anything in the building yet, so there is no rush to start. Since the wild beast has been dealt with, let's go in." Lagraz and Warrior Lexumi shouted and took the lead to walk into the building. Seeing this, the others did not dare to stay any longer and quickened their pace to walk inside. At this time, Li Ming knew very well that he was lucky to be able to come here. Since the wild beast was dead, those 8th level civilizations would definitely come in soon, so he had to search for items quickly and then leave here through the portal he had arranged earlier. Thinking of this, Li Ming's figure was already moving quickly on the second floor. On the shelves on the edge of the second floor against the wall, there were still some items that had not been taken away in time. Li Ming's sharp eyes and consciousness quickly scanned these things. Mo continued to look at the instruments in the polite alchemy furnace and said, "The elixirs refined by the Tisawi are all prepared for the beastmen or the insects, which is different from the alchemy of other civilized creatures. Refine elixirs for the beastmen and the insects?" Li Ming showed some doubts. He just glanced at Mo and didn't care too much. He continued to walk along the shelves and look. Mo looked up and thought for a while, then said, "In the documents of advanced civilizations, some records about the inner Earth civilization can be found, but not many. I also secretly saw it from the Isaiah people. There are no records of too detailed ones." Li Ming snorted lightly, shook his head slightly, and couldn't help muttering, "It's like I didn't say anything. Damn it, I'm kind enough to tell you this, but you have this attitude? Shameless." Mo said angrily, flapping his wings and scratching Li Ming's hair with his sharp claws. Li Ming waved his hands to stop him, but Mo was still unyielding. Li Ming grabbed the chicken's neck, but Mo's claws tightly grasped Li Ming's hair. "Damn it, I don't have time to mess with you at this time." Just as Li Ming was about to get angry, a light spot appeared on the upper layer of a shelf in the distance. It looked like a reflective mirror or a gem. Li Ming was instantly attracted by it, and he let go of Mo and slowly moved over. When the angry Mo saw Li Ming stop, he also stopped. Following Li Ming's gaze, he also saw the glowing object. Mo's eyes lit up, and his wings flapped. His body flew directly over. As soon as he landed on the shelf, he picked up the shiny object. After a chuckle, he looked at Li Ming coldly. "Quick, apologize to this star beast," Mo said, holding the object with the tip of his wing, turning it and playing with it, feeling extremely proud. Li Ming was about to say something but stopped, staring at the object with his eyes. The object was black in color, in the shape of a round cake, the size of a palm, and had a black and shiny appearance. I don't know what it is, but as a relic of an advanced civilization, it is necessary to have a deep understanding of it. Just as Li Ming was about to do something, there was a sudden noise from the distance behind him. Li Ming turned around and saw several figures appearing at the stairs on the second floor. Ismail, who was walking in front, rolled his eyes and immediately saw Li Ming. He narrowed his eyes slightly, snorted, and said, "Where are you going to run this time?" As he spoke, Ismail raised his arm and a black metal rod was extended. The tip of the metal rod flashed with a light blue light, and accompanied by a subtle arc of electricity, a football-sized ball of light had formed. With a muffled bang, the ball of light shot out. Once it broke away from the metal rod, the ball of light turned into an ellipse, with a blue light in the center and a white arc on the outside. The powerful energy instantly filled the surroundings, and the dark huge room was instantly lit up by this light. The ball of light was extremely fast and arrived almost in the blink of an eye. This kind of attack could not be avoided, but Li Ming was different. He knew the trajectory of the attack in advance, jumped up, hugged more and flew out. Bang! Lightning flashed and the ball of light hit the ground next to the shelf. The shelf shattered directly, and dozens of cracks appeared on the ground in an instant. Even the alchemy furnace in the distance shook a few times, and the shock wave spread around like a rolling wave. Li Ming's figure was blown more than 10 meters away by the shock wave like a fallen leaf. After a roll, Li Ming got up from the ground, turned his head, and immediately saw the stairs leading to the 3rd floor. He didn't dare to hesitate, ran over quickly, and went straight to the 3rd floor along the stairs. Want to run? Icemail raised his left hand, and 3 groups of black gas emerged from his palm, like 3 small snakes with long tails. After a rotation, the 3 groups of smoke merged together, and a black light flashed, and a 2-foot-tall strange bat suddenly appeared. The strange bat was like an eagle, flapping its wings, and flew into the air, and ran straight to Li Ming. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163 Alien Monster. Li Ming had just run a few steps along the stairs when he suddenly paused and looked back. The strange bat was coming towards him, its sharp claws grabbing Li Ming's head like a blade. In an emergency, Li Ming waved his right hand and a green object flew out of his hand. With a muffled sound of bang, the green smoke exploded, and more than a dozen vines stretched out from the green smoke like tentacles, and after a swing, they wrapped up the strange bird. The strange bat did not struggle too much after being entangled. A white light flashed on the surface of its body, and a loud boom exploded directly. The electric arc and energy surged to the surroundings, and the vines were instantly torn into pieces by the energy shockwave. The two offset each other and disappeared, leaving only the residual power of the energy shockwave rippling in the air. Li Ming just took a closer look, and then quickened his pace, to climb to the 3rd floor again. Icemail was very surprised and frowned slightly. The 7th level civilization in front of him seemed not simple. I'll go after him. Seki behind him suddenly shouted, stood up and flew over. After the others looked at each other, some looked at the shelves around, and some looked at the furnace curiously, already attracted by these things. Icemail was still angry, whispering, I'm afraid this kid has searched this place, let's catch up, and kill him first. After saying this, he quickly walked towards the distant stairs. Israel glanced at the 2nd floor casually and followed quickly. Faced with the mess on the 2nd floor, the 3rd floor might be a better place to go, or worried that the good things would be taken by others first. None of the 8 people chose to stay, and continued to walk to the 3rd floor. Li Ming arrived at the 3rd floor first, and he was shocked when he glanced at it. The entire 3rd floor was empty, without even a stone pillar, not to mention other items, as if it was an empty square. The only difference from the 2 floors below was that the stone bricks on the ground were 1 meter long and wide, light yellow, and released weak energy, which was extremely weird. He glanced around and didn't care too much. Since there was nothing, he might as well go straight to the 4th floor. Anyway, he had to avoid the people behind him. He ran out quickly, and the light yellow floor made a rustling sound. He had just run less than 10 meters away, and his feet sank, as if something was pulling his legs. He looked down, and saw that there was nothing else except the floor. However, after a slight sense, Li Ming found that the stone slab under his feet had a strong gravitational force. Before Li Ming could do anything, the floor under his feet began to release powerful energy. Beams of white light continued to shoot out from the stone slab under his feet like laser weapons. Li Ming didn't know why, but he felt that his body was imprisoned and unable to move. The energy in the beams was also extremely strange. 2 figures came up from the stairs. They were Sage and Icemail. As soon as they appeared, they saw Li Ming's figure in the empty hall. Just as they were about to do something, they both paused. They saw Li Ming in the white light curtain, appearing and disappearing from time to time, and then with a whoosh, he disappeared along with the white light. Icemail frowned, revealing an incredible look. He looked around and found that even Li Ming's breath had completely disappeared. Such a strange phenomenon made this 8th level civilization think deeply, and he had no idea what was going on. Seki was also confused. The figure that was flashing in front of his eyes just now suddenly evaporated and disappeared. He really couldn't understand it. Li Ming felt dizzy and his body swayed. When he stabilized his body, he was already in a small square room. The walls of this room were airtight, more than 10 meters long and wide, and he didn't know where it was. Just as Li Ming was about to take a closer look, a tick-tick sound suddenly sounded beside his ears, as if some liquid was dripping from the top of his head. Li Ming turned his head and saw that there was already a pool of transparent liquid on the ground beside him, and liquid was constantly dripping from the top. Looking up along the dripping trace, Li Ming's face instantly became ugly. On the wall above his head, there was a strange grey wild beast lying. This beast was more than 3 meters long and shaped like a water drop. Its body was covered with hard substances similar to rhinoceros horns, about half a foot long. It had no eyes and no limbs. It only had a big mouth that was slightly open, and a black tongue was sticking out of the mouth. The black tongue was as thick as an arm, with a smooth surface, and covered with transparent liquid. The liquid that Li Ming saw was dripping from this thing. Staring at the beast with both eyes, his eyebrows tightened. Li Ming immediately realized something. He kicked his feet hard and his body instantly jumped 7 or 8 meters away. The wild beast fell directly from the roof and hit the ground with a muffled bang. Knowing the danger in advance allowed Li Ming to successfully avoid the attack of the beast, but under the consciousness, Li Ming was still full of sorrow and couldn't help whispering, "A wild beast of the 8th level. A wild beast of this level of strength far exceeds civilized creatures of the same level of strength." In other words, this wild beast is more powerful than the 8th level civilized aliens outside. This made Li Ming tense up, and he responded more carefully. Not only Li Ming, but also Mo, whose head poked out from Li Ming's chest and stared at the wild beast, was extremely nervous and said, "This is an underage alien monster. Alien monsters are different from the wild beasts we are familiar with. They are more powerful. They are synthetic monsters cultivated by advanced civilizations using technology." Mo's serious expression was completely devoid of the previous playfulness. His solemn expression was mixed with a bit of worry, as if he recalled the sad past. Li Ming didn't know that the opponent's 8th level strength was what Li Ming was worried about. The monster's body twisted slightly, and its black tongue stretched out 2 meters away. The tip of the tongue was flat and swayed gently like a palm leaf fan, as if the radar was searching for a target. A green shadow immediately appeared on Li Ming's body, and the eyeballs of his eyes turned into golden water drops. The beast's every move had already entered Li Ming's consciousness. The beast had no eyes, no ears, and no nose, only a big mouth and a long tongue. The swinging tongue continuously released a subtle ripple under Li Ming's sharp eyes, which looked like a radar. Although Li Ming could sense the other party's actions, Li Ming's behavior was completely under the other party's sensing. The beast did not attack immediately, but slowly approached Li Ming. Every time it advanced 1 meter, it could clearly hear the sound of da-da-da. This sound came from the bone spurs all over the body of the beast. The bone spurs were extremely hard, and were the limbs used by the beast to move. The power generated by the bone spurs scratching the ground pushed the body forward. It seemed a little slow, but it was pushing Li Ming into the corner little by little. The space here was not big to begin with. The beast approached Li Ming little by little, forcing Li Ming to retreat continuously, but he had reached the corner after only a few steps, and the beast was still approaching little by little. With his eyes narrowed slightly, Li Ming suddenly waved his right hand, releasing grey poisonous mist again. These poisonous mists were formed by Li Ming's energy release, and played a huge role in dealing with lead, an 8th level civilization. Facing the released grey poisonous mist, the monster didn't know whether it was unaware or not afraid. Its body continued to move closer to Li Ming, and its long black tongue continued to swing. Although it was covered by the poisonous mist, it was still not affected at all. The poisonous mist didn't work. Li Ming's eyes widened a little, and he was a little surprised. Seeing that the tongue was only 3 meters away from Li Ming waved his arm again and threw out a green sphere, which was the seed of the alien race. As soon as the seed flew out of his hand, the black tongue wrapped it up like lightning and then retracted and sent it into the monster's mouth. A muffled sound of bang was heard, and green mist emerged from the mouth of the wild beast, and at the same time, several vines with long thorns stretched out. Li Ming smiled slightly. Swallowing the seed, I'm afraid this monster is going to be in trouble. Before he could even start to smile triumphantly, the monster's big mouth suddenly opened and closed, chewing, and the vines sticking out of its mouth were sucked into its mouth, just like eating noodles. Oh my god, this guy. Li Ming began to panic. The poison mist was ineffective, and the alien species was eaten directly. Could it be that he really couldn't do anything to this monster? Exclamation mark. Chapter 164, Beast Essence. With a flash of thought in his mind, Li Ming raised his right hand slightly, and a long sword appeared in his hand. At the same time, he collected the poison mist energy again, and gathered it in the long sword Hulang. After entering the 7th level civilization, Li Ming has mastered the unique ability of the Stardust weapon Hulang. For now, whether he can defeat this monster depends entirely on this weapon. When Li Ming, who was full of confidence, was about to do something, he suddenly foresaw the danger, and swung his long sword in front of him. He saw a flash of black light and shadow, and the black tongue attacked like lightning. The black tongue and the long sword collided with each other instantly. Li Ming took advantage of the situation, and swung it to cut off the black tongue, but when he swung it with all his strength, the long sword could not move at all. Li Ming was shocked. Looking at it with his eyes, the black tongue actually wrapped around the long sword. How is it possible? Li Ming shouted in surprise, as if in Li Ming's cognition, this soft tongue is absolutely impossible to resist the slash of the Stardust weapon. Just as Li Ming had an expression of disbelief on his face, the black tongue suddenly retracted, and with a powerful force, it pulled the long sword out of Li Ming's hand. The black tongue curved and rolled, and the 5th level Stardust weapon was sent into the mouth. Then a rough chewing sound was heard again, crunch, crunch as if eating crisp bones. Li Ming was completely stunned this time. Damn it, you can actually even eat this? As he said this, Li Ming couldn't help but shrink his body, but there was only a wall behind him, and there was no way to retreat. Moore opened his mouth nervously at this time, and shouted in fear, "Are we going to be eaten?" Li Ming tensed up his nerves, staring at the slowly approaching monster. His face was already a little pale, and he held the walls on both sides with both hands, thinking quickly in his mind. I don't want to be eaten. Think of a way quickly. Hurry up. Moore became even more panicked, and roared at Li Ming. Of course, Li Ming didn't want to be eaten by the monster, but he was almost forced into a desperate situation. The most important thing was the opponent's long black tongue. It looked soft, but even the 5th level Stardust weapon couldn't do anything about it. The most important thing was that its attack speed was like lightning. Even if Li Ming could predict the danger, the opponent's time between the intention to attack and the actual attack was very short, and there was almost no chance of dodging. In a panic, Li Ming fumbled in his pocket with his right hand and took out the star capsule. A blue light flashed, and a strange axe fell out of the star capsule. This strange axe was what Li Ming got after killing Claire of the 8th level civilization. As soon as the axe came out, the black light flashed again, and the long tongue swept over and tightly wrapped it, and then pulled it back, and the whole axe entered the monster's mouth. Crunch, bang, the chewing sound sounded again, as if eating delicious food. Seeing this, Li Ming quickly activated the star capsule again. A blue light flashed, and a star bag fell out. After killing Claire, in addition to the strange axe, Li Ming also got 5 star bags. I don't know what's inside. This star bag is one of them. He picked it up and carefully sensed it. It was full of nebula power, and there were 7 of them. Li Ming didn't care about these things now. He threw the star bag out casually. Before the star bag landed, the black tongue rolled and retracted again, and the star bag was put into the mouth. However, the star bag was too small, and didn't need to be chewed at all. It was swallowed together with the strange axe that had just been chewed. The star bag in Li Ming's hand flashed blue again, and another star bag fell out. This time, Li Ming didn't even sense what was inside, and threw it out. The monster seemed to accept everything. Everything thrown by Li Ming was taken into his mouth with his black tongue. Almost in the blink of an eye, Li Ming had thrown out 4 of the 5 star bags he searched from Claire's body, and the last one was already in his hand. But when Li Ming was about to throw it out, the monster suddenly became strange. A low roar sounded, like a burp, and a bit like Moore's cry. Li Ming did not throw away the star bag in his hand. He narrowed his eyes, and looked over curiously. The monster roared, and rolled his tongue. The black tongue of a python did not swing around, but kept stretching towards his throat, as if he wanted to take something out of his stomach. This strange scene made Li Ming feel a little puzzled, but after thinking about it, he seemed to understand something. The corners of his mouth rose, and revealed a faint smile. It seems that not everything can be eaten. Li Ming muttered to himself, and his nervous expression relaxed slightly. 2 5th level stardust weapons, 7 nebula powers, and 3 star bags with unknown contents. So many items in his stomach made the monster feel a little uncomfortable. At this time, in addition to the wailing, the monster's body began to move backwards slowly, as if to get away from Li Ming. The other party's action made Li Ming completely relieved, and he laughed softly. Even Moore on his chest looked at the monster curiously, with a confused look on his face. What is it? Is it holding on? Moore muttered softly, and he couldn't tell what it was. Li Ming didn't understand the reason, but it was obvious that this monster was not a threat to him for a while. Just when Li Ming turned his eyes to other places in the closed room, the monster's body suddenly became abnormal. The monster kept rolling on the ground, turning over and over, and the sound of its wailing became more and more painful, and its body seemed to be slowly expanding, as if something was pumping air in its belly. Such a weird scene made Li Ming's face change instantly, and he couldn't understand why. If the monster felt pain, Li Ming could understand it. After all, the violent nature of the 7 nebula powers was amazing, but the nebula power would only destroy the flesh and tissue, and there would be no such obvious expansion. Excluding the power of the nebula and the stardust weapons that were chewed into pieces, there were only the 3 star bags, but Li Ming didn't know what was in the 3 star bags. While Li Ming was thinking, the body of the monster had doubled in size, and was still growing, like a balloon. If this continues, Li Ming whispered, but before he finished speaking, he could hear the sound of skin being torn apart, as if the monster was about to explode. A muffled bang sounded, and various liquids and flesh tissues splashed out. The monster actually exploded. Li Ming quickly raised his arms to block it, so as not to splash on himself. After the sound of crackling, the whole room was full of blood and flesh. He put his arms down, and the monster in the distance was motionless, and a big hole appeared in its abdomen. Li Ming turned his eyes, and walked slowly over. A fishy smell instantly came over, and the monster's ruptured abdomen was already in front of Li Ming. The previously swallowed items were gone. It was unknown whether they were digested, or flew out in the explosion just now, but there were still some residues in the stomach. After Li Ming took a quick look, his eyes suddenly lit up, and he found something, a white bead the size of an egg. This bead was as bright and white as a pearl, very conspicuous. What is this? Curious, Li Ming waved his hand, and the white bead flew out of the flesh and blood, and fell into Li Ming's palm. While Li Ming was observing, Moore also widened his eyes, and became a little curious. Could it be, Beast Yuan? Moore said with some doubts, and seemed not sure. Li Ming's eyes sank, and he looked at Moore on his chest. Just as he was about to speak, the whole room suddenly became abnormal. The splashed beast blood seeped into the wall or the ground little by little, and the surface of the wall of the whole room began to flash white arcs. Chapter 165, Teleporting Tiles. The arc was jumping, the space was shaking, and waves of energy were constantly released from the 4 walls and the ground above his head. Li Ming had no idea what was happening, and he didn't care to look at the white bead in his hand. He clenched his palm, and put it away first. The arc became more and more intense, like lightning and thunder. There was no harsh sound, only the continuous flashing of white light. The eyes kept switching between light and darkness, and the whole head felt a little drowsy. Li Ming closed his eyes and frowned, using energy to suppress this pain. After a few seconds, all the pain disappeared. Li Ming shook his head and slowly opened his eyes, but after a glance, he had left the closed house just now, and returned to the 3rd floor of the giant building. There was still no change here. It was like an empty square, without a single stone pillar. The stone slabs on the ground were still the same light yellow, but after a look around, the stone slabs under Li Ming's feet became abnormal. The stone slabs on which his feet were standing had become black at this time, as if they were scorched. At the same time, the strange gravity had completely disappeared, and the energy in it could not be sensed at all. This kid is still alive. A rough voice came, interrupting Li Ming's thoughts. He looked around and saw several 8th level civilizations standing not far from him. However, there were only 4 of the original 8th level civilizations left. Ice Male was sitting cross-legged on a black stone slab, but his face was a little pale at this time, and he had lost an arm. In addition, Lagrazan's General Lexami was also sitting cross-legged on a black stone slab, and his complexion looked better. There were 2 people standing at the stairs in the distance. They were Israel and Inkina people. As for the other 4 people, they had disappeared. The person who spoke just now was Lexami. Judging from the black stone slabs under them, Ice Male and Lexami had obviously suffered the same fate as Li Ming. Li Ming saw this and slowly leaned over and sat cross-legged while carefully looking at the stone slabs around him. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if he was observing some treasure, staring closely at these strange floor tiles. With his wisdom, Li Ming clearly saw that the light yellow floor tiles were indeed extraordinary. Each tile contained strange energy, and the energy swirled inside the stone slabs in a vortex. This energy was not unfamiliar, it was the energy for transmission. Li Ming had taken a large number of teleportation gates and teleportation arrays from Mars, and he had some knowledge of the energy types required for transmission. The energy running in these floor tiles in front of him was exactly the type of energy required for transmission. Li Ming took a rough look and found that all the floor tiles here had the ability to transmit. The more so, the more worried Li Ming became. He looked at the light yellow floor tiles and slabs with his eyes and muttered to himself, if each slab is transmitted to the room with the monster, then wouldn't it be? Thinking of this, Li Ming showed a bit of panic and uneasiness, and at the same time, looked at the far end of the hall, where there were stairs leading to the 4th floor, and there were dozens of floor tiles and slabs away from Li Ming. Just as Li Ming was staring into the distance in a daze, a stone slab not far behind him suddenly flashed with light, and a figure emerged. As soon as this person appeared, the stone slab under him was already dark. Li Ming looked back and saw that this alien was Seiki, a member of the Shixing people. However, his body was covered with scars, and he was panting. He had already gone through a life and death battle. As soon as this person appeared, he sat cross-legged on the ground and took out the star bag to restore his energy, ignoring the situation around him. Li Ming was not surprised to see this scene. The 8th level monster was indeed extremely fierce. Li Ming's lucky victory was just an accident. After all of Li Ming's attack abilities were ineffective against the monster. Israel, who was far away, had a sad face and even showed some worry. He looked at Li Ming with his eyes and couldn't help but secretly said, according to Ice Male, there are 8th level beasts in there. Even we, the 8th level civilizations, have difficulty dealing with them. How come this 7th level kid looks unscathed? Not only Israel was puzzled, but other 8th level civilizations could not understand the reason. After a short rest, Ice Male looked at his missing left arm and then looked at the steps in the far corner of the hall. He suddenly remembered what happened to him in the stone slab transfer space, and an idea came to his mind. Everyone, although the wild beast in this stone slab is powerful, as long as we kill it, its blood will activate the transmission device inside and send us back. The stone slab with the killed wild beast is safe. As long as we join forces, there will be no problem reaching the next level. Ice Male said loudly. Although he was not sure about this judgment, he still said it in a decisive manner. Ice Male also had his own considerations for such a firm statement. On the one hand, he was dissatisfied with this trip. After all, he had not gained anything at this point. On the other hand, he lost an arm, which was even more unwilling. Join hands. How to join forces? Leximi, who was standing aside, looked at Ice Male and seemed to think that what he said made some sense, so he whispered back. Ice Male snorted and replied, we will teleport in pairs. Even if we encounter wild beasts, we can handle them. Then, we will go straight to the stairs with the front of me as a straight line. Leximi looked up and looked into the distance. Just as Ice Male said, the stone slab in front of him did lead directly to the stairs, but there were dozens of tiles. Even if the 2 of them joined forces, such a large number made Leximi hesitate. Seeing this, Ice Male snorted coldly and said, what? Are you all scared? That kid from the 7th level civilization has walked ahead of us. Are we not as good as him? After saying this, Israel, who had not yet stepped on the stone slab behind him, nodded slightly and said, okay, when we get close to that kid, we will kill him first. But, who will go to the next stone slab with me? While speaking, Israel looked at the 8th level civilization of Inkina next to him, as if he was asking the other party. Then I'll do it. The 8th level civilization of Inkina replied immediately. The two hit it off immediately, looked at each other, and then walked towards the depths of the stone slab at the same time. After coming to Icemail, who was sitting cross-legged, they each took a step and stepped on the stone slab in front of Icemail. As soon as they stood on the stone slab, the light on the light yellow floor tiles flashed, and the teleportation array started automatically. After a few seconds, the two figures disappeared instantly. As soon as he saw the two disappear, Icemail nodded with satisfaction, and his eyes turned to look at Li Ming in front of him. As soon as he looked at each other, Li Ming was stunned. Li Ming was 3 stone slabs away from Icemail. The strong gravity of the stone slab restricted the body and energy. Even if there were only 3 stone slabs, the other party could not do anything to Li Ming for the time being, but Israel and the Inkina man had joined forces to enter the next stone slab. When these two came out, they would be one step closer to Li Ming. If this continued, these people would join forces to move forward, and Li Ming would be in great danger. Damn it, if this goes on. Li Ming turned and looked at the steps leading to the 4th floor in the distance. The powerful energy inside his body began to flow, and golden water droplets appeared in his eyes again. At the same time, the Sign shadow reappeared on his body. The wisdom ability has been released. Looking at the stone slab in front of him, it is like looking at an energy vortex. As long as he steps in, he will be sucked into it. Li Ming thought quickly in his mind, and at the same time, his right hand slowly stretched out. As his right hand stretched out, the Sign shadow suddenly expanded, and a large Sign hand grabbed the energy vortex in the stone slab, just like a hand grabbing a high-speed rotating gear, and the energy rubbed and collided with each other. Li Ming's move was to try to stop the automatic transmission ability of the stone slab. Under the prevention of the Sign hand, the vortex did not stop, but only slowed down. Despite this, Li Ming still showed a smile, and at the same time his left hand stretched out, and another Sign shadow hand stretched into it. Both hands exerted force at the same time, and the energy in the body and the transmitted vortex energy began to interweave and rub violently. Li Ming gritted his teeth and continued to increase the output of energy. The speed of the vortex became slower and slower. Crack, it was as if the gears were stuck by something hard, and the rotation of the vortex had stopped. Li Ming's eyes widened a little. After hesitating for a while, he stood up and took a step forward. Li Ming's step made Icemail's eyes widen a little in the distance, but the next moment, Lexami was also shocked. Li Ming in the distance was actually standing on a stone slab and was not teleported away. What's wrong with this guy? Lexami said in surprise, and his eyes couldn't help but look at Icemail on the side. Icemail was already shocked, and after shaking his head slightly, he couldn't understand it at all. Chapter 166, Entering the 4th floor. Without the ability of wisdom, it is impossible to see through the energy vortex inside the stone slab, and without the existence of the phantom, it is impossible to stop the automatic transmission of the stone slab. Although these 8th level civilizations are higher than Li Ming, they do not have this ability. Although he has taken a step forward, Li Ming is still in trouble. The energy vortex under his feet is controlled by Li Ming with both hands. Once one hand is loosened, the vortex may restart and he will still be unable to move forward. If the stalemate continues, it will only consume energy endlessly, which is meaningless. Icemail in the distance seemed to see something. After a light snort, he whispered, although this kid has some special means, it seems that he can't move forward. Lexami nodded slightly, showing a proud look, and the previous fear and worry slowly subsided. But before the two people's proud expressions were fully unfolded, something strange happened on Li Ming's side. Suddenly, a red light shone in front of Li Ming, and a red phantom suddenly appeared. The red phantom and Li Ming's Sign phantom leaned against each other, but did not repel each other. The red phantom was released by Mer. It seems that I still have to take action, Mer said after a few chuckles. Don't talk nonsense. If you don't want to see the monster again, do it quickly, Li Ming said anxiously with a strenuous expression. When the monster was mentioned, Mer couldn't help but glance at Li Ming. Then the phantom suddenly grew larger, like an expanding flame, and then two red hands stretched out directly to the stone slab in front. Mer's phantom ability is far greater than Li Ming. The red big hand grabbed hard, and the energy vortex stopped immediately. It seemed much easier than Li Ming. Li Ming did not dare to hesitate, and hurriedly took another step forward, and entered the next stone slab. As Li Ming moved forward one more grid, the stone slab in front of Ice Meal suddenly flashed, and two figures appeared. They were Israel and Inky Na, who had just entered. When the two appeared, they looked calm and unharmed, and seemed to be dealing with it more easily. It's really much easier with two people taking action. It seems that we can reach the 4th floor in no time. That kid, Israel said excitedly, and at the same time thought of Li Ming. Looking back, Li Ming had actually moved forward 2 stone slabs, and Li Ming standing on the stone slab was not affected by the stone slab's teleportation at all. What's going on? How did this kid do it? Israel's originally happy expression disappeared completely, and he showed an unbelievable expression. Ice Male said nothing, just looked at Li Ming in the distance with strange and resentful eyes. Just when everyone was puzzled, Seiki, who had been resting for a long time, slowly stood up at this moment. Although he didn't say a word before, he saw everything. Although this person is not of high rank, he must have some special means to circumvent the effect of the stone slab. Although we can work together in pairs, we should not be too proud. We have 3 people who have never come out after entering the stone slab, Seiki said in a seemingly calm tone, and after glancing at the others, he continued, now that things have come to this, I think everyone does not need to be too anxious. Anyway, this building is completely closed. Even if that kid arrives on the 4th floor in advance, what can it do? As long as we pass this floor safely, this kid will still fall into our hands. Everyone nodded slowly after hearing this. There were only 5 people left out of the original 8, and one of them had a broken arm. They really couldn't be too anxious, and they had to continue to cooperate with each other. Seiki said this, glanced at Lexami beside him, and continued, let's go, Lexami, it's time for us to act. Okay. Lexami took a fierce look at Li Ming in the distance and replied loudly. Li Ming heard the conversation of these people clearly, but he had no time to look back. He focused his eyes and used all his strength. 2 blue shadow hands grabbed the next stone slab. In this way, Li Ming and Mo took turns to move forward slowly, 1 stone slab at a time. Compared with Li Ming, those 8th level civilization life forms were obviously much slower. They restored energy every time they moved forward, and then changed people to exchange for the next stone slab. As time passed, Li Ming's steps became more and more difficult, but he was getting closer and closer to the stairs leading to the 4th floor. The energy in his body was quickly consumed, and Mo was also panting. Both of them looked exhausted. After leaving the last stone slab, Li Ming squatted directly on the steps. His face was pale and extremely weak. He flipped his hand and took out a star bag to start restoring his body's energy. Mo also did the same thing and lay on Li Ming's shoulder with his eyes closed and motionless. Although there were only a few dozen stone slabs, it felt like he had walked a very long way. Fatigue and weakness filled his body. In addition to quickly restoring energy, he didn't want to say a word. Li Ming was recovering his energy. Israel in the distance had already looked over with resentful eyes. At this time, they were still 10 stone slabs away from the steps. They could only watch Li Ming quietly without any way to deal with it. After the energy was recovered, Li Ming opened his eyes slightly. It seemed that the 8th level civilizations were less than 10 meters away from him, but this distance was not easy to cross. With a slight smile on his lips and a glance at those people, Li Ming stood up and walked to the 4th floor. Seeing Li Ming walking to the 4th floor, these 8th level civilizations felt even more uncomfortable. They gritted their teeth one by one. Most of them didn't say anything, but when they thought about being taken advantage of by a 7th level civilization, they wanted to tear the other party into pieces immediately. Li Ming's feet quickly stepped into the 4th floor, and a new scene appeared in front of Li Ming. The area of the 4th floor was a circle smaller than the 3rd floor. Facing the staircase was a vertical passage. The passage was located in the middle of the hall, with a total of 4 rooms on both sides. These 4 rooms lead directly to the top of the building, which is more than 10 meters high, like 4 square pillars. The door of each room is open, and there is no clue. Li Ming walked inside along the middle passage. He stopped and stood in the middle of the 2 doors. He looked to the left and the right. The 2 rooms were empty, with only a tall shelf. The shelf was made of some kind of meteorite, like a bookshelf, but there was nothing on it. It had been cleaned up. Li Ming shook his head slightly and continued to walk deeper. He walked along the passage to the middle of the 2 doors of the house. The left side was the same as the 2 rooms just now. There was nothing else, except an empty bookshelf. However, he immediately found something when he looked to the right. The room on the right looked like an office, with a meteorite table, a meteorite shelf similar to a locker, and a long clothes hanger. The table was empty, and the door of the locker was also open. There was nothing inside, but there was a cloak hanging on the long clothes hanger. This cloak was particularly conspicuous in the empty room. Li Ming's eyes were quickly attracted to it, and his eyes kept turning to look at it. He took a few steps forward, and came close to the cloak, staring at it intently. The cloak was yellow and white in color, with wide cuffs, like the sleeves of ancient robes. The yellow was shining with golden light, shining like a burning flame, and the white was like clouds, lifelike, as if floating bit by bit. On the back of the cloak, there was a cyan pattern, like a green dragon, seemingly still, but it always felt like it was swimming. Li Ming's eyes widened a little, his mouth slightly opened, and his face showed excitement and joy. This dress should be a high-level product of alien civilization. Li Ming was amazed, and slowly stretched out his right hand, intending to sense the strange breath in the dress. Chapter 167 Multiple World Barriers. As soon as Li Ming's fingers touched the clothes, a strong energy wave spread out. It felt like his hand touched a strong electric current. With a muffled sound of bang, accompanied by the fluctuation of space, Li Ming's whole body trembled slightly. At this time, Mo, who had been lying on Li Ming's shoulder, also woke up. He looked around and immediately noticed the clothes. Facing such a mysterious clothes, Mo only showed a surprised look and had no idea what kind of item it was. Li Ming did not dare to touch it easily, but showed a thoughtful look. This clothes is really strange. It can't be touched. Li Ming couldn't understand the reason and stroked his chin with one hand to think about it. Could it be? Li Ming opened his eyes slightly and suddenly remembered something. When Li Ming just got Liu Anding, a similar situation happened. Although Liu Anding was not untouchable, Li Ming's ability of the 5th level civilization at that time could not move at all, and he needed to obey the consciousness inside. This dress seemed to be more powerful and could not be touched. HMPH, since we can't touch it, just put it away first. Whispering like this, Li Ming raised his hand and took out the star capsule. The blue light flashed, and the whole dress was covered in it like a blue gauze. In the blink of an eye, the whole dress disappeared and was put into the star capsule. With a light squeeze of his palm, the star capsule disappeared in his palm. Li Ming began to look at other places in the room with satisfaction. With his eyes and consciousness, he carefully checked the whole room. There was indeed nothing else. With a turn of his body, Li Ming left directly. At this time, the stairs of the 4th floor appeared in the distance. Li Ming did not hesitate and continued to walk up along the stairs. In a blink of an eye, Li Ming stepped into the space of the 5th floor. Standing at the entrance and looking up, there were no extra floors. This building actually only had 5 floors, but there was a strange device on this floor. In the middle of the 5th floor is a black platform, pentagonal, more than 1 meter high. In the middle of the platform is a semicircular light curtain, like a glowing bowl in the middle of the pentagonal platform, and there is a light column in the center of the light curtain that reaches the top of the house. Li Ming walked forward curiously to take a closer look, and then he discovered the secret. In the middle of the light curtain of the pentagonal platform is a round bead the size of an egg, which is white as a hole, like a small sun, dazzling. The semicircular light curtain is released by this bead. As for the light column on the light curtain, Li Ming does not quite understand what the purpose is. The light column goes straight to the depths of the roof, and the end is not visible. Although it is not clear what the purpose is, the powerful energy in it can be clearly sensed. Standing next to the pentagonal platform is like standing on the edge of the sea. The powerful energy is like the vast ocean, which seems to be inexhaustible. So much energy. Li Ming looked at the bead in surprise and exclaimed. According to Li Ming's cognition and experience after entering space, as long as something contains energy, it must be a good thing. Li Ming has no control over others. This is definitely the standard for Li Ming to look at things. Looking at the bead in front of him, an idea popped up in Li Ming's mind. Since this bead has so much energy, take it away, then you don't have to worry about energy in the future. Thinking of this, Li Ming smiled slightly, stretched out his right hand, and grabbed the white bead in the air. The white bead trembled slightly, and then it actually floated up. As the white bead floated up, the outside world suddenly shook violently, and the sky of the entire Io ruins trembled, as if someone had shaken the sky in the ruins. This violent vibration even spread to the world outside the ruins. In a giant base on the same star, 5 people sat in front of an operating table. These 5 people were 5 9th level civilizations. The blue light on the operating table intertwined, showing a huge area of the Io ruins. This area was full of mountains and rocks, and overgrown with grass and trees. It was the entrance to the Io ruins. However, after a slight vibration, the blue light became unstable. There was a sudden spatial fluctuation in the sky above the rocky area, as if the air was about to crack. Imogene's eyes quickly noticed these changes, and looked over carefully. The sky above the entire area of the Io ruins seemed to be covered by a transparent bowl. The light curtain was similar to the light curtain on the pentagonal platform, and the spatial cracks were like a sudden crack in the bowl. This is. Seema narrowed his eyes, revealing a puzzled look, and whispered. Odom beside him seemed to see the clues, and said with a serious face, is this a multi-world barrier? Multi-world barrier? Seema said more curiously. Not only Seema, but the other 3 also cast strange eyes on Odom. Odom shook his head slightly, as if he was not sure, but he continued, we all know about the parallel worlds in the parallel universe, but the multiple worlds are different. This area looks like real mountains and real water, but once the barrier is lifted, the real mountains and real water will disappear, and another world will be revealed. This is the multiple world barrier. Odom explained in detail, and after saying this, the others also understood. The so-called multiple world barrier means that people from 2 worlds live on a piece of land, and then use technical means to cover the previous world with an energy barrier. The 2 can coexist, and do not interfere with each other. Seema nodded repeatedly and said, no wonder we couldn't sense a teleportation point when we found the entrance. Just as everyone was talking, another violent vibration was emitted, and the entire blue light map became unstable, and the spatial fluctuations became more violent, as if a gap was torn in the sky. From the map, the gap was not big, only a few centimeters, but in the outside world, the sky was torn into a large hole several kilometers long and wide. Originally, this area was full of rocks and trees, but after the crack was torn open, a tall building suddenly appeared and covered the rocks. When this phenomenon appeared, Imogene stood up first, glanced at the others, and said, I think we should go outside to take a look. Seema nodded and stood up, saying, indeed, although the Io ruins are protected by multiple world barriers, now that there is an abnormal phenomenon, we should go out and take a look. As he said this, several other 9th level civilizations also stood up and nodded slightly. While talking here, Li Ming was pulling the bead with energy. The white bead had entered the light curtain under the pull of Li Ming's energy. The light curtain was like a big net. The white bead seemed to be blocked by this light curtain, and it was difficult for Li Ming to pull it out. As Li Ming's strength increased, the white bead was slowly breaking through the light curtain, just like something was slowly emerging from the water. As Li Ming exerted his strength, the sky outside was already rumbling. Huge lightning flashed continuously in the sky. Several thick lightning bolts appeared for no reason under the cloudless sky. Anyone who saw it felt strange and uneasy. Along with the lightning bolts, there were also space fluctuations that appeared and disappeared from time to time. It was as if the sky was being torn apart by someone, and in the higher sky, several figures were carefully watching the fluctuations here, each with a strange look on their faces. Li Ming had no idea about these. With the powerful energy in his hands, the white bead gradually broke through the light curtain under the effect of the energy, and revealed a little Seeing that he was about to succeed, Li Ming showed a look of joy, but before he could smile, Li Ming's face changed immediately. The bead just protruded from the light curtain and turned from white to black. Li Ming looked puzzled. Just as he was about to continue pulling hard, the whole bead suddenly darkened, as if a light bulb suddenly went out. As the bead darkened, the light curtain also disappeared with a muffled sound of bang, and the light column that went straight to the top of the building dissipated instantly. As soon as this strange phenomenon occurred, Li Ming retracted his hand that had been grabbing into the air and looked around quickly. Chapter 168 Energy Collapse. Boom was deafening, and a ball-shaped net formed by electric arcs kept oscillating and flickering. Under the eyes, this area was constantly changing like an illusion. Sometimes it was a mountain and rock forest, and sometimes it was a tall building, but this phenomenon only lasted for a few seconds before it completely stopped. The previous mountain and rock area was completely gone, replaced by a city area with buildings. The ruins of Io. Sima said in a low voice, while looking down at the tall buildings below from a high altitude. The other people naturally saw it all, but they just looked at each other and did not do much. Previously, entering the Io ruins required a fixed entrance, but now the entire ruins are in front of us, and there is no entrance to divide. On the third floor of the building, where Li Ming was, 5 figures stepped out of the last stone slab one by one and came to the steps. Haha, finally passed through this area. Leximi chuckled twice and said so. Ice Male looked at his broken arm, his face instantly turned gloomy, and he said, once the energy is restored, go up and kill that guy first. The other few people did not say much, but silently took out the star bag and began to restore the energy in their bodies, but these people did not know that the outside world had undergone a huge change. Without the barrier, those who intended to enter the ruins of Io, but had no way to start suddenly brightened up. Regardless of the high-level civilization, they were attracted by the building here and began to move closer to it. As the barrier disappeared and the energy collapsed, the building where Li Ming was located began to tremble slightly, and a black vortex quietly emerged in the center of the pentagonal platform. The vortex expanded little by little and released a strong gravitational force, and the surrounding matter was also slowly swallowed. Not good. Li Ming shouted and discovered the abnormality, but his body was slowly pulled by the gravitational force of the vortex. In a hurry, Li Ming waved his palm, and a small green light flashed out. Under the energy, the green light quickly expanded into a portal. Li Ming's figure swayed into it and disappeared directly. When Li Ming reappeared, he was already at the bottom of the side of the building. This was the place where Li Ming had placed the portal before entering. After looking around, Li Ming quickly left. Although Li Ming's figure was small, the 9th level civilizations in the sky watched him carefully. However, there were many people looking for treasures in the ruins of Io, so no one paid much attention. Although Li Ming had left, the pentagonal platform on the 5th floor had completely disappeared, replaced by a giant vortex black hole. The entire building was shaking more violently, and the objects around the black hole were slowly broken and drawn into it. Buildings above the 5th floor collapsed, bricks and stones shattered, walls collapsed, and some of the fallen stones and debris were directly swallowed by the vortex, while others revolved around the vortex. From a distance, it looked like a small galaxy, and the debris and rubble floated and revolved around the vortex like a meteorite planet. The 9th level civilization in the sky and far away soon discovered the strange phenomenon here. Zelalia narrowed her eyes slightly, and without caring about the other people, she moved and flew over first. This sudden behavior immediately attracted the attention of others. Without caring too much, these people also hurriedly set off and flew over. When the 5 9th level civilizations arrived above the vortex, the entire building had completely collapsed, and several figures were fleeing from the bottom of the vortex in different directions. These people were Ismail and others. Zelalia's eyes only moved slightly, and she immediately locked onto Israel, who was running. The figure moved and flew directly down. The other 9th level civilizations naturally did not hesitate. After seeing their subordinates, they also rushed away. After a while of running, Li Ming quietly hid beside a building. Looking back, the vortex had expanded several times and had a tendency to continue to expand. Not only had the entire building disappeared, but the surrounding ground and buildings also began to be swallowed up by bit by bit. The reason was unknown, but it seemed that the vortex would continue to expand. Li Ming turned around and continued to walk quickly into the distance. Walking along the streets of the city, there was more than just this military building in the lower city. Li Ming originally planned to go to other places, but thinking of the strange vortex and those 9th level civilizations that were eyeing him, Li Ming gave up the idea and decided to leave this place first. Li Ming's figure gradually went away. Near the vortex behind him, Solalia was looking at the brothers Ismail and Israel with a stern face. From what you said, you got nothing this time. Solalia's eyes showed some doubt, and she looked at the two again. Ismail snorted in anger, and just as he was about to speak, he stopped talking. Seeing this, Israel sighed slightly and said, not only us, but also several other races have not gained anything, but... At this point, Israel seemed to think of something, but hesitated and did not say anything. Zalalia's eyebrows twitched. She could see that the other party did have some important information to tell her. With the corners of her mouth slightly raised, she said, you two brothers can be stationed on the Pollock Star with my tacit consent. If I hadn't shown up this time at the Io ruins, would those 9th level old monsters let you in? It has come to this. Is there anything else you can't say? Israel had a sad look on his face. He glanced at Zalalia and couldn't help but lower his head slightly. After hesitating for a moment, he sighed again and said, it's not that we can't tell you about this. I'm just afraid that those small star raiding groups will hear it in the future, affecting the dignity of my two brothers. Humph. Zalalia shook her head slightly in disdain. Is life more important? Or is face more important? Israel was still hesitant and didn't know whether to say it, but Ismail on the side snorted and said, actually, it's nothing. We were working together to kill a wild beast, and a 7th level kid took the opportunity to slip in. This guy may have gotten something good, but that guy should have died in that whirlpool. Zalalia narrowed her eyes slightly, and her face suddenly became ugly. After hearing the other party mention the 7th order civilization, she suddenly thought of something in her mind, and said lightly with a cold expression, died in the vortex? Not necessarily, I can see clearly from the sky. Before you left here, there was a kid who left here and went west, and this collapsed vortex only appeared after that kid left. What? Ismail shouted in shock, showing an unbelievable expression. Okay, you guys pack up and prepare to return to Pollock Star. As for that kid, he shouldn't be able to run far now. Zalalia said calmly, as if she was not worried that Li Ming would escape. She turned around and flew away from here again and headed straight to the west. Flying at high altitude, her eyes were like two scanners, and anything in the building and the street could not escape her sharp eyes. Zalalia searched carefully along the direction where Li Ming escaped. While searching, Imogen, Nugent and an 8th level disciple appeared in Zalalia's sight, but Zalalia did not stop at all, just took a second look, and then quickly continued to go west. Imogen was talking to this disciple of Inkinaya. After slightly looking up, he noticed Zalalia, and couldn't help showing a puzzled look. Imogen frowned slightly, looked at Nugent beside him, and whispered, didn't Zalalia go south just now? Nugent also nodded slightly in confusion. His eyes narrowed, and said sternly, I'll follow and see. Imogen rolled his eyes, waved his hand slightly, looked at the 8th level civilization in front of him, and said, Marquis, do you have anything else to say? Marquis of the 8th level civilization hurriedly bowed his head and thought about something quickly, but in the end he shook his head slightly and said nothing. Imogen sighed deeply and said again, we have two first magicians of the 8th level civilization in Inkinaya. One of them died, and we have gained nothing. Marquis, can you evade these questions? Marquis was stunned for a moment, lowered his head, and dared not raise it. After hesitating for a while, he said tremblingly, Grand Mage, please forgive me. The collapsed building is full of wild beasts with 8th level strength, and it is full of traps and extremely dangerous. Not only our Inkinaya, but also the Shixing people and the Lagrazan people have lost one person. Humph. Imogen snorted disdainfully and said, this, you go back and explain to Grand Mage Hesher. After all, you are a disciple of the witchcraft clan. As soon as he finished speaking, Imogen glanced at Nugent and said, let's go and see what tricks Solalia is playing together. As soon as the voice fell, Imogen and Nugent took off and left. Seeing the two 9th level great magicians leave, Marquis breathed a sigh of relief. Chapter 169 Leaving SYNOPSIS. Walking along the streets of the city for a short distance, you can clearly see the high mountains and stone forests. The appearance of these scenes made Li Ming confused. After all, when he came in, the ruins of Io was just an independent space, not connected to the outside world of the SYNOPSIS area. The strange scene at this time made Li Ming very puzzled. Thinking in his mind, Li Ming still walked forward quickly without stopping, but after a while, a figure suddenly fell from the sky with grey light. After the light, a long-faced alien appeared more than 10 meters in front of Li Ming. It was Solalia. As soon as he sensed the breath of the other party's 9th level civilization, Li Ming was stunned. His face changed instantly, and he was at a loss. I heard that you found the treasure in the ruins of Io. Will you hand it over voluntarily? Or wait for me to do it myself? Solalia glanced at Li Ming with contempt and said sternly. Li Ming shrank slightly, not knowing how to respond to the other party. His eyes moved slightly, and his mood became flustered. HMPH. Looks like you're waiting for me to make a move, Solalia said coldly, while raising her right hand. A ball of grey light had formed in her palm. Powerful energy was circulating in the grey light. Li Ming's face turned pale when he saw the grey light. The powerful energy was definitely not something Li Ming could resist. Just when Li Ming was at a loss, a voice came from the sky. Solalia, are you going to kill people? Two balls of blue light fell quickly. The people who came were Imogen and Nugent. Imogen glanced at Solalia. He didn't care about the grey light in her hand. However, when he saw Li Ming, he was suddenly startled, and his eyes widened a little. Li Ming? Imogen couldn't help but shout out, and was immediately surprised and unbelievable. This strange expression in the act of calling her name surprised Solalia. She retracted her right hand and put it away, and the grey light dissipated. Nugent also looked at Imogen in surprise, and then looked at Li Ming, and seemed to remember something, and said with a little surprise, why? Is he the alchemy master you mentioned earlier? Imogen laughed excitedly and nodded repeatedly, and said, that's right. Solalia was confused at this time, but she could also see that this 7th level kid in front of her seemed to have some relationship with Imogen. Li Ming turned his head and saw Imogen, and hurriedly bowed deeply, and said, disciple greets the great magician. Yes. Imogen nodded with satisfaction, and the smile on his face was no longer concealed. At the same time, after glancing at Solalia not far away, he said, Solalia, this person is from our Insignificant. He lost contact because of the disintegration of the spacecraft a few days ago. I didn't expect to meet him here. If it weren't for you just now, I'm afraid I wouldn't have found him. Imogen said as he walked towards Li Ming with a smile. Solalia's eyes showed reluctance, but when she saw Imogen and Nugent, two 9th level civilizations, her face immediately eased, and she said, so you are from Insignificant. I originally wanted to take you back to our Pollock planet. In this case, I will take my leave first. As soon as the voice fell, Solalia quickly stood up and flew away directly. Looking at Solalia leaving, Nugent snorted disdainfully and said, this old witch knows what's good for her. Imogen didn't care. He looked up and down at Li Ming, as if he was looking at a treasure, and nodded repeatedly, making a sound of tsk 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 from his mouth. It's great to see you again. Let's go back to Insignificant now. As he spoke, Imogen walked directly into the distance. Li Ming breathed a sigh of relief. If Imogen hadn't appeared in time just now, his life would be in danger. He looked back at the black vortex that was still expanding in the distance, and his figure had already followed Imogen and went away. Under the leadership of Imogen, Li Ming came to the Insignificant base on the star Simu. Huge buildings appeared before his eyes. The architectural style of these buildings was almost the same as that of Insignificant's spacecraft. They were all in the shape of meteorites, like a pile of stone mountains. In front of the largest base operating table in the center, Imogen sat down with satisfaction. He looked at Li Ming, and then at Nugent, and said with a smile, with this master of alchemy, we will be able to deal with the alien catastrophe. Nugent seemed to still have some doubts. He looked at Li Ming with his eyes and said, "Imogen, are you so confident?" "Yeah." Imogen nodded very confidently and continued, "I have witnessed his alchemy ability with my own eyes. You don't have to worry about this. The Orion spiral arm of the Milky Way will usher in an alien invasion. At this juncture, material reserves are very critical." Seeing Imogen's confident expression, Nugent's doubts subsided a lot. After looking back at Imogen, he sighed slightly and said, "It's just a pity that we got nothing from the Io ruins this time." Imogen nodded, although he felt a little regretful, but when he saw Li Ming, he smiled and said, "It doesn't matter if there is no harvest. We should also evacuate Samustar to prepare for the alien invasion." So saying, Imogen looked at Nugent with his eyes and said again, "Today I will take Li Ming back to Inkinaya, and I will trouble you to handle the finishing work of Samustar." Nugent nodded and said, "Okay, leave it to me." The two talked like this, and Li Ming, who was standing by, heard it clearly, and at the same time, he began to think in his mind. Alien invasion? Li Ming had no knowledge of this aspect. What Li Ming knew about aliens was that when he was on Earth, humans had imagined such scenes and filmed them into movies, but they were all fictional content. Li Ming still had some curiosity about what the real aliens looked like and where the invasion came from, but he was not worried. After all, even if there was danger, there were still these 9th level civilizations. Thinking of this, Imogen suddenly stood up, looked at Li Ming, and said, "Okay, it's time for us to set off." As he spoke, Imogen walked directly to the passage of the base. Li Ming followed closely behind him, not daring to say much. Inkinaya has a large number of garrisons on the planet Simu. This is the same as the civilizations of other planets, all for the resources of Simu. At present, in order to cope with the new survival challenges in the universe, these garrisons will be withdrawn to their home planet. Not only Inkinaya, Shixing, Lagrazan, Phila, Macestis, etc., all the troops stationed on Simu need to evacuate and return to their home planet to deal with the crisis. Before the huge garrison evacuated, Li Ming had already left in a giant meteorite spacecraft. This giant meteorite spaceship was the one that Imogen drove when he came to Samustar. However, this time Li Ming was not arranged in a separate cabin, but followed Imogen to stay in front of the operating table in the main cabin of the spaceship. Li Ming stood on the left of Imogen, and the spiritually civilized Yumi Starman Albert stood on the right. Imogen sat in front of the operating table and carefully checked the changes and movement trajectory of the spaceship. The meteorite spaceship slowly rose into the air, and after reaching a certain height, it began to activate the transmission system. First, it had to get rid of the gravity of Samustar, and then enter space, to perform long-distance transmission according to the safe coordinates. Li Ming looked around, looking at the operating table for a while. He looked at Albert next to him, and at the workers in the distance. There were a large number of low-level aliens at the edge of the main cabin. These people were mainly responsible for the operation of the spaceship and other matters. Li Ming's eyes were not looking at how these people operated, but searching for various information bit by bit through the ability of wisdom eyes. At this time, all the aliens were like information storage devices, and the information in their heads was like glowing light bulbs, all under Li Ming's detection. As his eyes scanned, all kinds of information quickly entered Li Ming's brain. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170 Inkinaya Star. Inkinaya belongs to an intelligent civilization. The wisdom here is different from that of humans. They have a higher understanding of the use of energy. Whether it is spacecraft or weapons, they are beyond the reach of humans. Every alien is in existence beyond human cognition. With Li Ming's current civilization level, it is easy to understand. Li Ming has the foundation of intelligent civilization, so many things are not difficult to understand, but the information that Li Ming is most concerned about right now is about alien invasion. Aliens are non-civilized races. They are not aliens, but are classified as beasts, but they are stronger than beasts. Beasts are more common. For example, The dinosaurs that once ruled the earth belong to the beasts. Although they ruled the earth for nearly 200 million years with their powerful size and physique, they are vulnerable once they encounter civilized creatures. Aliens often live on wandering planets. This kind of planet has a strong gravitational force and is extremely large in size. It travels around in the universe. Once it enters a galaxy, it will pose a huge threat to the balance of the galaxy. According to the astronomical observations of the Insignificant people, an alien wandering planet is slowly approaching the Orion Arm and is very likely to enter the magic source system. If this kind of planet enters the magic source system, it will be affected by the gravity of the magic source star and stay in the galaxy, and the entire magic source system will become the target of alien invasion. In order to deal with this possibility, the Insignificant people, the only life civilization in the magic source system, must be fully prepared. Alien invasion is no longer a secret, but most of the time, the galaxy can survive, because the trajectory of the wandering planet, where the alien is located, is unpredictable. It may be heading towards the magic source system now, but it is entirely possible to change itself after a period of time. For this reason, many aliens do not worry too much about it, but once the existence of such a planet is discovered, it is still necessary to be as prepared as possible, because there have been incidents of alien invasion in these galaxies, which will be a devastating disaster. With this basic information about the aliens, Li Ming is no longer too worried. For now, he will return to Enkanda with peace of mind to see if there is a chance to continue to advance civilization. The giant meteorite spacecraft is quickly transmitted according to fixed coordinates, and the light spot moves forward little by little in the light curtain on the operating table. Although it is transmitting, the entire spacecraft is as stable as a mountain, and there is no strange feeling inside. Such a smooth transmission is precisely a demonstration of the powerful civilization of Enkinyastar. Not long after, the light of the spacecraft flashed again, and a gray-green planet appeared in front of us, which was Enkinyastar. At this time, the low-level civilizations in the main cabin also began to get busy, contacting the ground, determining the coordinates, and arranging to enter the planet. A series of operations were skillful and rhythmic. Li Ming could sense this series of operations clearly with his consciousness, and after everything was confirmed, the meteorite spacecraft began to slowly approach the atmosphere of Enkinya. Of course, in the technology of high-level civilizations, they would not forcefully pass through the atmosphere, but would use the method of transmission. Each spacecraft has its own fixed number and docking position. After communicating with the ground and entering the coordinate position, the spacecraft began to transmit. This transmission was different from the transmission in space. Li Ming only felt that the spacecraft shook violently, as if there was an earthquake, but it soon returned to stability. It felt like bungee jumping, which made people tremble with fear. But the staff on the spacecraft were obviously familiar with this feeling. They were all calm and unconcerned. Only Li Ming was a little nervous. After the spaceship came to a complete stop, Imogen stood up with a smile, turned around and looked at Li Ming, and said, "Let's go. I've asked Hesha to arrange everything for you." Li Ming bowed his head and didn't dare to say much. A blue beam of light shot out from the bottom of the spaceship and went all the way to a platform on the ground. The beam of light was like an elevator. Imogen, Li Ming and Albert were the first to land. While feeling the technology of the beam of light, Li Ming's eyes also took a look at the surrounding environment. Under his feet was a platform of tens of kilometers. The ground was all flat and smooth gray stone surface, like the cut surface of a rock. In the distance, tall buildings can be seen. These buildings are all round and section by section, but the bottom ones are relatively thick, and the thinner they are as they go up, as if they can shrink. Each building is in the shape of a tower, but the height is different. But the weird thing is that the top of all the buildings is a rock surface with an uneven surface, like a shrinking umbrella. Looking at these buildings, Li Ming roughly understood their structure. These buildings were originally underground, or in a huge rock. They extended when needed and retracted when not needed. After attracting, the area returned to its original natural appearance, as if there had never been a building there. It was like a hidden elevator. When it fell, it was invisible, and when it rose, it was a tall building. Li Ming had heard on Earth that high-level civilizations are often better at hiding, so as to avoid being attacked by higher-level civilizations, just like the big trees on Fuller Star, which are not only powerful but also hidden. Looking with his eyes, he had already fallen back to the ground with the beam of light. As soon as he arrived on the ground, an 8th level civilization and many low-level civilizations came forward. Grand Mage, I have arranged everything according to your instructions. The 8th level civilization said respectfully after saluting. Imogen nodded with satisfaction, hesitated for a moment, turned to look at Li Ming, smiled slightly, and said, Edmund, this is Li Ming. Great Mage Hesha should have explained everything to you. Edmund smiled slightly, looked at Li Ming with his eyes, and said, Great Mage Hesha has already explained that Li Ming is the new first mage, and will be assigned to the Ancient Source District. Ancient Source District? Imogen said with some surprise, and at the same time his eyes turned slightly, as if thinking about something. Seeing this, Edmund raised his head slightly, secretly glanced at Imogen, and said hesitantly again, This is all arranged by Grand Mage Hesha. I'm just... Imogen waved his hand, nodded slightly, and said, Well, I understand. You take Li Ming over first. I have something to discuss with Grand Mage Hesha. As soon as he finished speaking, Imogen turned around and looked at Li Ming and said softly, You go with Edmund first. I have arranged a place for you to stay, and I will come to see you when I'm done here. Yes. Li Ming bowed his head and saluted, and replied quickly, looking at Edmund with a smile. Edmund also smiled back at Li Ming politely, and waved his hand at the same time, saying, This way, please. Li Ming nodded slightly and followed. Under the leadership of Edmund, Li Ming shuttled through many buildings, and also appreciated the charm of the alien world. On the street, pedestrians kept coming and going, and all kinds of aliens were walking around. The civilization level was mainly level 4, which looked like a bustling city. Similarly, some soldiers in armor could be seen everywhere, just like the royal guards, but they were slightly shorter. After all, the lower the level, the smaller the body. The situation here was similar to what Li Ming saw on Fuller Star. Most of the soldiers and civilians were level 4 civilizations. Perhaps this was the basis of the alien civilization. After passing through the busy streets, they came to a remote place. There were no more bustling aliens and soldiers here, but only a secluded path leading to the distance. There was little land here, mostly grey and hard rocks, and occasionally green vegetation, which were some plants that Li Ming had never seen before, and they were very rare. At the end of the road was an oval hill, which seemed to be just a semicircular smooth rock on the surface, but the abnormality was discovered after approaching. There was actually a huge building area on top of the rock. These buildings were wrapped in grey walls, and were independent areas. Each building was one story, and about 4 or 5 meters high. The walls of the buildings were straight, but the top was semicircular. Moreover, the semicircular rock on the top was the same as the entire giant rock, as if there were several protruding parts of the rock. It was completely imperceptible when viewed from directly above, and only when you were there could you see it clearly. Li Ming took a rough look, and found that there were more than a dozen buildings of various sizes here. A figure stood at the gate, as if waiting for Li Ming. As he approached the gate, Li Ming could see the appearance of the alien standing at the door. His appearance was no different from other Inquinas, but his face was full of wrinkles. He was an old man holding a black wooden stick in his hand, like a cane. When he saw Li Ming, he smiled and greeted him. But when Li Ming saw this smile, he felt a chill on his back, and felt extremely uncomfortable. He always had an inexplicable sense of fear, but after sensing it, he found that this old woman was also an 8th level civilization. Chapter 171 Ancient Origin Area. As soon as Edmund saw the old woman, he stepped forward and bowed deeply, with a respectful look on his face, and said, Old Mage, this is Li Ming mentioned by Grand Mage Hesha. The old woman laughed dryly twice, squinted her eyes, and looked at Li Ming, nodded repeatedly, and said, Okay, very good. Come in. Edmund glanced inside the door, shook his head slightly, and said with a smile, Disciple has other things to deal with, so I won't go in. Li Ming is in your care. Although they are both from the 8th level civilization, Edmund has great respect for the old woman. The old woman did not insist on staying, waved her hand casually, and said, Then you go and get busy. Edmund bowed, glanced at Li Ming, and then stepped away. The old woman looked at Li Ming with her eyes, turned around and walked inside, and said, "Let's go, follow me." Li Ming looked at the old woman, always feeling strange, but unable to explain it. He glanced at Edmund, who had already gone far away, and could only follow the old woman inside. After passing through the white gate, they came to a large courtyard. On the left side, deep in the wall, there was a row of 3 houses. On the right side, there were also 3 houses. These rooms were single-story buildings, and there were some characters on the top of the gate of each house. "My name is Eugenia. I have been responsible for the daily management of the ancient source district for countless years." The old woman walked slowly in front, and kept talking. Li Ming retracted his gaze from the distance, and nodded slightly to the old woman named Eugenia. Eugenia did not look back, and continued to walk slowly, saying, "From now on, the ancient source district will be under your management. I will mainly take you to familiarize yourself with the situation here, and then explain what should be explained to you." After saying this, Eugenia suddenly stopped and looked back at Li Ming. Li Ming bowed his head and nodded, without saying much. Eugenia walked 2 steps to the left, came to the first building on the left, raised her head slightly, and looked at the characters above the gate. Li Ming followed her gaze, and recognized the flashing characters, which were the word magic. In Insignificant, there were originally 6 tribes, but that was many years ago. Now they are basically in decline and disappeared. This room was the storage room of the magic tribe back then. Eugenia looked at the door and said longingly. After looking at it for a few more times, she nodded repeatedly, and walked to the right again, saying, "Now all the members of the magic tribe are gone. They have completely disappeared. The items in the room are all from the magic tribe back then, such as star registration, weapons, and other things. Since the demise of this tribe, the door of this room has never been opened." Li Ming nodded and looked at the room, feeling a little fascinated, but after looking at it for a few more times, he followed Eugenia to the right. Arriving at a door on the right, Eugenia stopped again, hummed, and said, "This is the storage room of the witchcraft tribe, which is also one of the 2 remaining tribes in Insignificant. The great magician Hesha is the leader of this tribe. Speaking of which, Hesha was my disciple back then." After introducing, Eugenia shook her head slightly, and continued to walk forward, until she stopped at the second door on the right. Li Ming followed slowly, while looking at the room of this witchcraft tribe. Arriving at the second door on the right, Li Ming's eyes immediately saw the characters on the door, and he couldn't help but whispered, "Summon." Eugenia didn't speak immediately, but just stared at the door without saying a word, with a complicated expression on her face. After a long while, Eugenia turned and walked to the left. Then she said, "This summoning tribe originally had a great magician. During the last disaster of Insignificant, he sacrificed his life to summon the death beast to help Insignificant resist the disaster, but he died just like that. Since then, this tribe has declined and has been extinct for hundreds of years." Eugenia said so, and there was even a bit of sadness in her words. This kind of dedication is still relatively rare in the world of high-level civilizations. Of course, Eugenia said so, and Li Ming could not investigate the specific facts. His expression was calm, and he was also half believing and half doubting. Coming to the second room on the left, Li Ming first discovered something unusual. The appearance of this room was bright and beautiful, bright and new, as if it was newly built. Among the rooms just seen, except for the room of the witchcraft tribe, most of the others were relatively old. Looking up and concentrating, the 2 words, element, have come into view. Eugenia nodded repeatedly at the word element, and couldn't stop saying, "The element tribe is now the mainstay of Insignificant's combat power. It has 2 great magicians, and is one of the only 2 civilizations left in Insignificant. If it weren't for the appearance of these 2 great magicians, Insignificant really couldn't be on par with the nearby major galaxies," Eugenia said, with a few sighs in her tone. Li Ming stared at it with his eyes fixed, and after staring blankly for a few seconds, he nodded slightly. Grand Mage Hesha had just been mentioned by Eugenia. He was the Grand Mage of the witchcraft tribe. If there were only 2 tribes left in Insignificant, then Imogen and Nugent must be the 2 Grand Mages of the element tribe she mentioned. This can be understood with a little thought. Eugenia turned around and walked towards the last house on the left. Li Ming hesitated and followed. The 2 characters time, and space appeared under the eaves. Eugenia just glanced at them and said nothing more. She turned back to the middle of the two rows of houses. Her eyes wandered around, even looking at the house on the right. Then she walked straight ahead. Li Ming didn't understand why. He looked to the left and then to the right, a little confused. The house on the right was relatively simple, with slightly dilapidated walls and no name. It looked like a house that had been abandoned for a long time. Eugenia didn't introduce these two houses immediately, but it also made Li Ming more curious. However, he didn't ask more questions at the moment. After walking a few steps, Eugenia slowly said, "This time and space tribe and the mystery tribe over there are relatively ancient tribes. Since I came to this ancient source area, I have never seen the doors of these two houses opened. It's too long ago," Eugenia said slowly, and walked inside without looking back. Li Ming looked around a little more, didn't say anything more, and still followed behind her. Further ahead is a tall wall that divides the huge courtyard. In the middle of the wall is an arched doorway, which leads to the other half of the area. Passing through the doorway, there is an open area on the right, like a farmyard, with a golden tree growing on it, and a two-story attic on the left. As for the front, there is a three-story house, tall and majestic, with a gorgeous appearance. Eugenia first glanced at the house on the left, and then said, "This room is where I live, and your room is right in front. This ancient source area has been without an owner for a long time. Hesher arranged you here, which can be regarded as adding some vitality to this place. Let's go in, I'll show you," Eugenia said as she walked towards the three-story house. As soon as the door was opened, there was a spacious living room. All the tables and chairs were made of meteorites, with exquisite craftsmanship, and exuding a slight energy atmosphere. Both the second and third floors can be used for living. You can arrange them as you like. Eugenia continued to speak, and at the same time she had walked to the innermost part of the house. There were several holes similar to windows on the wall inside the house. Eugenia stood in front of the holes, and looked far behind. Li Ming was also a little curious. He walked over quickly, and looked through one of the holes. The scene behind was already in his eyes. Behind the three-story building was a backyard. The area was not large. There was a house on each side, and a black stone path in the middle. Looking along the path, there was a portal at the end of the black path. No one knew where it led to, but it was a bit mysterious. Eugenia turned around, and stopped looking outside. Instead, she said, "This backyard is a forbidden area in the ancient source district. You cannot enter without the permission of the three great magicians. Do you know that?" Li Ming looked at the backyard curiously, two mysterious houses, and an unknown portal. After hearing Eugenia's voice, he quickly turned around and saluted, and replied, "Disciple will remember this." "Yeah." Eugenia nodded with satisfaction, slowly walked towards the door, and continued, "I'm old, and I feel tired." After walking a few steps, "I'll go back to rest first. You can look at the rest by yourself." As Eugenia spoke, her body had already left the house little by little, and walked towards the two-story house where she lived. Chapter 172, Beast Illustrated Book. The house where Li Ming lived had 3 floors, and there was a portal in each of the 3 floors, which was very convenient. Li Ming first came to the second floor, which had 2 rooms. Apart from the simple facilities, there was nothing unusual. Then he came to the third floor, which was still exactly the same as the second floor. After Li Ming walked a few steps on the third floor, he suddenly thought of something. He raised his right hand and waved it, and a blue beam flew out and entered the portal directly. This light was formed by energy and consciousness, which was equivalent to adding an alarm system to the portal to prevent someone from suddenly breaking in. After doing this, Li Ming turned and entered the innermost room and closed the door at the same time. In the room, Li Ming sat cross-legged on the ground and shook his sleeves. A white beam shot out, and a white thing on the ground in front of him rolled out from the white light. It was more. He lay on the ground with his wings spread out, his head pressed tightly against the ground, looking listless. Li Ming glanced at him with disdain and said coldly, "Moo, take out the things." Mer didn't move. After rolling his eyes back, he replied, "Things? What?" As he spoke, Mer closed his eyes. Li Ming snorted coldly, grabbed the chicken claw, and lifted it directly in front of him. He looked at him angrily and said, "Then I'll remind you, it's on the shelf on the second floor of the IO ruins." Before Li Ming finished speaking, Me's eyes widened a little, flapped his wings a few times, and said, "I remembered it, but it's still in the beast cloud clothes. I'll get it out for you." Li Ming sighed deeply, waved his right arm, and Me turned into white light and re-entered the clothes at the cuffs. After sighing slightly, he could only shake his head helplessly. After waiting for a while, the smur still did not come out. Li Ming's eyes turned, thinking about something. He turned his palm again, and a white bead appeared in his hand. This bead was the item found from the corpse of the alien monster. According to Me, this item was called Beast Essence, but Li Ming had never heard of it. He held the bead in his palm and stared at it closely. He could feel the energy contained in it, but he didn't know what the bead was used for. Just as Li Ming was concentrating on studying the beast essence, a light flashed in his cloak, and Me came out with a black object. "Here you go," Me said, holding the round object with his wingtip. Li Ming showed a satisfied look, put the beast essence aside, and took the object in his hand. This black object was only the size of the palm, in the shape of a round cake, with a smooth surface like a mirror, and flashing a dim light. Li Ming closed his eyes slightly, injected his consciousness into it, and carefully pondered it. When his consciousness entered it, he felt a muffled bang in his head, as if his spirit entered a dark space, and then a phantom began to emerge. These phantom images were formed by splicing light spots. The phantom images were not people or objects, but some kind of animals. These animals were strange and bizarre, and they were all wild beasts, and they were all species that Li Ming had never seen before. In addition to wild beasts, there were also insects, birds, etc., as if it was a space that recorded the uncivilized creatures in the universe. These phantom creatures were vivid and lifelike, flying around in the air, but eventually they all drilled into Li Ming's brain. Every time a creature drilled into his brain, Li Ming's brain had an extra piece of information. At this time, Li Ming's cognition soared rapidly, as if he had recognized many unknown creatures at once. The records were detailed and clear, and compared with the animal star books that Mo had given Li Ming, they were simply many levels lower. Li Ming also had a great interest in this information, and invisibly, Li Ming had an illustration of uncivilized creatures. The species and types of creatures were recorded in trillions. At first, they were just phantoms entering his mind, but as Li Ming read faster, the phantoms also accelerated their speed of entering his mind, as if each phantom turned into a light spot and disappeared in a flash. The picture was like countless stars rushing together in Li Ming's brain. After an unknown amount of time, the starlight had become less and less, until it disappeared completely, and such a huge amount of information was also ingrained in Li Ming's mind. It seems that the star book is all the information of non-civilized creatures recorded by the Tsaui people, Li Ming said secretly, and he knew very well that as one of the oldest civilized races, the information recorded was also the most comprehensive. Even if there were unknown records, they were very few. Li Ming was surprised to obtain this information. As the starlight disappeared, Li Ming was also ready to retract his consciousness, but at this moment, a piece of golden characters appeared again. The golden characters were not arranged in order, but were floating one by one, like individual planets. The appearance of these characters surprised Li Ming. He originally thought that the contents of the star book were only the animal illustrations. The appearance of these characters made Li Ming concentrate again. Compared with the animal illustrations in the front, the characters in the back were more profound. Li Ming looked at the floating characters with his eyes and frowned. In his consciousness, Li Ming was concentrating. In reality, Li Ming's body was shining with green light, and green shadows surrounded his body. It was because Li Ming had used the ability of the wisdom eye. These golden characters were extremely profound. Li Ming could not understand them without using the wisdom eye. With the stimulation of the wisdom eye, the information of the golden characters gradually became clear. Although it was time-consuming and laborious, the content inside greatly attracted Li Ming. Beast Soul Pill. Li Ming couldn't help but whisper. Although his consciousness was still in the star book, Li Ming in reality had already blurted it out. Mo, who was playing with the white bead beast essence, was immediately shocked when he heard these three words, as if he had heard something horrible, but he also showed a happy expression, as if he loved and hated that thing. After blinking a few times, his eyes stared at Li Ming, but at this moment Li Ming's eyes were closed, and his consciousness was completely in the starbook, and he did not notice Mo's expression at all. The information about the beast soul pill was also entering Li Ming's mind bit by bit. The golden characters floated very slowly, and it took a long time for one to enter the brain. This required the blessing of the wisdom eye ability. Without the wisdom eye, Li Ming could not understand it at all. The beast soul pill is mainly used to feed non-civilized creatures, including star beasts. This pill has a powerful effect on any non-civilized creature. After taking it, it can promote growth and advancement. There are 3 ways for non-civilized creatures: growth, advancement, and evolution. These 3 ways do not coexist in ordinary wild beasts. Ordinary wild beasts only have one way, which is advancement. Both non-civilized creatures and civilized creatures can advance. The difference is that civilized creatures have consciousness and wisdom, and can find ways to promote their own advancement and improve their strength. But non-civilized creatures are different. They can only advance passively, and only when the living conditions are extremely comfortable and the energy resources are abundant. The advancement of non-civilized creatures often takes too long, and is extremely difficult. Wild beasts belong to this kind of beasts. The only beasts that can coexist with advancement and growth are alien monsters. Alien monsters originate from wild beasts. Wild beasts will become monsters after special environments or artificial genetic changes. Humans call them monsters formed after mutation, that is, alien monsters. This beast is extremely powerful, far superior to wild beasts in terms of physique and attack power, and has the function of growth. Advancement is the growth of strength, and growth is the change of body shape and appearance, which is not possessed by civilized creatures. The only beast that can coexist with growth, advancement, and evolution is a star beast. Star beasts also originate from wild beasts, cannot be changed artificially, and can only be generated naturally. They are extremely rare species. Growth can change the appearance of the star beast, advancement can increase the strength of the star beast, and evolution can increase the ability of the star beast. From these 3 methods, it can be inferred that the star beast has the most room for growth among the beasts, followed by the alien monsters, and finally the wild beasts. This information comes from the illustrations in the front of the star book, and of course it is inseparable from the beast soul pill. As the golden characters are slowly interpreted, Li Ming's understanding of this pill is getting deeper and deeper, which naturally includes the refining method and material formula of the beast soul pill. Of course, these are not the most important. The time-consuming and laborious refining of the beast soul pill by the Tsui people is not just as simple as feeding the beasts. The beast soul pill has 2 functions of growth and advancement. It is the only pill required by beasts of all levels, and the Tsui people even added consciousness to the formula of the pill. Although the intention was not explained, Li Ming could see the clues at a glance. Consciousness can control and restrain beasts, just like the blood contract between Li Ming and Mo. Li Ming can forcibly restrain Mo, but this consciousness added to the elixir is obviously to use the beasts to accept the consciousness in the elixir, while accepting the effects of the elixir, and control it. After reading this, Li Ming took a deep breath, and said to himself, this Tsui people are so insidious. Chapter 173, Imogen's Concerns. It's insidious, but I like it. Li Ming said this secretly, and read the contents of the star book more attentively. Li Ming was concentrating on reading the star book, but in the high-rise building far away in the ancient source area, Imogen was talking to Hesha. The two sat quietly at a table in a house, looking at each other. Imogen's face was a little ugly, and he said, Hesha, it's not appropriate for you to arrange Li Ming in the ancient source area. The 6 storage rooms there are star books from ancient times, and the 2 material warehouses in the backyard are full of various materials we have collected over the years. The most important thing is, where is Barnes still imprisoned? Imogen said with some concern. Hesha, however, had a calm expression on her face. After hearing what Imogen said, she couldn't help but chuckle twice and said, Imogen, you are too cautious. Barnes has not submitted to us for so many years, and we won't even let him see him. You know the reason. If Li Ming is really the rare alchemy master you said, wouldn't that make Barnes one step closer to submission? As for the star nationality of those storage rooms, there is no need to worry. He is an alchemist with a background of biological civilization. Why should he learn the star nationality of our wisdom and civilization? Hesher showed contempt at this and continued, to put it bluntly, that guy is just an alchemy slave who makes pills for us. Giving him some rights is to keep him and make him make pills for us wholeheartedly. If we lock him up in a small dark room as you said, do you think he can make pills well? If he has outstanding abilities and Barnes submits to us, then by that time, it will be just around the corner for us, in Kenaya, to dominate the nearby galaxies. Hesher spoke meaningfully, as if everything was under her control, but Imogen was always a little worried and uneasy, and his expression was uneasy. Hesher chuckled twice again, and said, don't worry, as the great magician of the witchcraft tribe, I'm definitely better than you at winning people's hearts. Just do what I say, and you may get unexpected gains. Imogen was half believing and half doubting, and his face was still full of doubts. After hesitating for a while, he said, okay, then I will arrange it according to your words, but, you can give him the power, but you'd better let Eugenia keep a close eye on him. Imogen, who stood up and prepared to leave, gave another stern warning. Hesher nodded slightly, with a confident look on her face, and replied, don't worry. Although Imogen was still worried from the bottom of his heart, but when he saw Hesher's confident look, he could only sigh and turn away. As soon as Imogen left the room, the portal in the room flashed with light, and a figure walked in. This person was Marquis of the 8th level civilization. When Hesher saw Marquis, her face immediately darkened. After a light snort, she said unhappily, you still have the nerve to come back? Marquis was stunned for a moment, and quickly bowed his head. He dared not say much, his eyes rolled, and his face was full of worry. Hesher slowly stood up and continued, I finally arranged for you and Balfour to enter the ruins of Io, but you got nothing. That's not all, even Balfour died inexplicably. Imogen has told me everything. What kind of punishment do you think you should receive? Marquis shrank slightly, and his trembling body showed his inner panic. But after some thought, Marquis raised his head slightly and said, on this trip to the Io ruins, all forces gained nothing. I know this is not the reason for my failure, but there is one thing I must make clear, before accepting the punishment. Oh. Hesher glanced at the other party in surprise, and at the same time, took 2 steps forward to Marquis and whispered, Marquis, I don't want to hear nonsense. Marquis lowered his head again, and said very solemnly, although we all gained nothing, there is a person who entered the high-rise building of the Io ruins. This person is most likely to get the treasure. This person is Li Ming. Upon hearing the name Li Ming, Hesher's face suddenly changed. She looked at Marquis sternly and said directly, are you talking about Li Ming who I arranged to the ancient source area? It was this person. In the Io ruins, we, the Shixing people, and the Lagrazan people were unable to enter the high-rise buildings, but this kid found a loophole. If there are any treasures in it, he is most likely to get it. Marquis said firmly. Hesher's eyes moved slightly, and she began to think. At the same time, she slowly returned to her seat and sat down. After looking Marquis up and down, she said, I know, you can go down. Yes. Marquis hurriedly bowed his head and slowly stepped away, and he breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, Li Ming, who was sitting cross-legged in the small room on the 3rd floor, slowly opened his eyes, but his expression was very complicated, as if he had some puzzled problems. Beast Soul Pill, Beast Spirit Pill, at the current level, I can only learn these 2. Looking at the star book in his hand, he couldn't help but sigh slightly. The limit of the level made Li Ming unable to cultivate many star book contents to the top, and his face showed a look of distress. It seems that we still have to find a way to improve the civilization level as soon as possible. Whispering like this, Li Ming clenched his palm. The star book disappeared directly in his hand. Looking around, there was only a pure white bead on the ground in front of him, which was the beast element. Mer had already disappeared. With a slight sense, Li Ming noticed Mer's trace in the cloak, and then he was relieved. With a wave of his right hand, the white bead slowly floated up, and fell into Li Ming's palm. After reading the star book just now, he also had some understanding of the beast essence in his hand. It turns out that beast essence can only be found in the body of alien monsters. He muttered in his mouth, but his eyebrows shrank slightly, and he began to think. Regarding beast essence, Li Ming had already learned about it in the star book just now. This item is very rare, and can only exist in the body of alien monsters, and not all alien monsters have this thing in their bodies. Beast essence is an alchemy material, but it is not used to refine nebula pill, but to refine Li pill. This material is also mentioned in the alchemy star book in Fei's secret realm, but Li Ming cannot learn the method and technique of refining Li pill at this level. But one thing is certain, that is, the beast element is extremely rare and powerful, and many elixirs needed as the main material. Although it is a good thing, it is not needed at the moment. Li Ming clenched his palm and put it away. Taking a deep breath, Li Ming gradually closed his eyes. He had just used his wisdom eye ability to read the beast star book and consumed a lot of energy. He needed to recover now. He closed his eyes and held the star bag in his hand and began to recover energy bit by bit. Time flew by, and before he knew it, Inkina star ushered in the night. The bright moon hung high in the night sky, illuminating the earth. Two people slowly walked into the courtyard of the ancient source area and walked lightly to the 3-story attic in the middle. Li Ming upstairs suddenly opened his eyes, as if he sensed something, and hurriedly got up and went to the house outside. He raised his right hand and pointed at the portal, and a green light shot out from his finger. The green light was like a bullet, and it flashed into the portal and disappeared. This action was to unlock the alarm set at the portal before. Not long after the portal was lifted, a light flashed, and a figure walked out. It was Imogen. Although Li Ming had noticed someone approaching in advance, he didn't expect it to be Imogen. He quickly stepped forward and bowed, saying, "Meet the Grand Mage." Imogen smiled quietly, waved his hand casually, and said, "No need to be polite." As he spoke, Imogen looked around the house with his eyes and sat down in the middle of the house, saying with a smile, "I'm still getting used to it here." Li Ming turned around and bowed to Imogen again, but he didn't say a word. However, Li Ming's brain was already thinking quickly. What was Imogen doing here at this late hour? Was he going to start making pills for him? Chapter 174 Ancient Origin Order. Imogen patted the table in front of him and said with a smile, "Sit down and talk. There are no outsiders here, so there is no need for you to be so polite to me." That's what he said, but after all, the other party was a 9th level civilization. How could Li Ming dare to be rude in front of him? He just straightened his body slightly and replied, "Disciple, just stand." Imogen showed satisfaction, but did not force it. After a slight hesitation, he continued, "Originally, I was planning to let you come to my place, to be the first ice mage of our element tribe. I didn't expect that Grand Mage Hesher arranged this place for you in advance. It's really wronged you." Li Ming smiled slightly and replied respectfully, "Disciple will follow the arrangements of the Grand Mage." "Yes." Imogen nodded, his face turned serious, and he continued, "This ancient source area is the important place of our Incanaya. I believe Eugenia should have introduced it to you today. The first 6 rooms are the important place of star weapons, and the 2 rooms at the back store Incanaya's materials and supplies. You should understand my intention to entrust such an important place to you." Li Ming hurriedly bowed deeply and replied firmly, "This is the trust that the great magician has in his disciples. The disciples will be loyal to the great magician with this important task. I understand. Although the position here is lower than that of the magician, the power here is great. I basically control the most confidential items of Incanaya, so you can't let me down." Imogen said seriously. Although his expression was serious, there was still a hint of smile in his tone. Li Ming still looked serious and replied solemnly, "I will do my job well, and will never let down the great mage." Imogen nodded again with satisfaction, but his expression changed slightly. After looking at the portal in the house, he suddenly said, "Come in." The portal flashed with light, and the Yimi alien Albert walked in. As soon as he entered the room, he saluted Imogen first, and then stood up straight. Imogen slowly stood up, turned his right hand, and a token appeared in his hand. This token was bronze in color and the size of the palm. It looked ancient, but it exuded a strong energy atmosphere from its depths. This is the Ancient Source token, which controls the opening of all houses in the Ancient Source district. Since the ancient source district has been fully entrusted to you, this ancient source token should also be kept by you. While Imogen was speaking, he actually handed the token to Li Ming. Li Ming was shocked. He didn't know what Imogen's intention was. He bowed his head and hesitated to take the item. Imogen raised his hand and said more sternly, "Giving you this item is the trust that I and the great mage Hesha have in you. Don't you want it? Disciple dare not." Li Ming raised his head and said, after a slight hesitation, he stretched out his hands to take the ancient source order. Seeing this, Imogen nodded with satisfaction. "Tomorrow, you will get familiar with the environment here first and count the materials in the warehouse behind. After all, you will have to make pills soon," Imogen said with a smile. While speaking, his eyes even glanced at Albert not far away. Albert looked serious, nodded slightly, and said nothing. Seeing Albert's response, Imogen was relieved. His eyes returned to Li Ming and said, "Okay, it's getting late. I'll go back first." As soon as the voice fell, Imogen turned around and left quickly. The portal flashed, and the two disappeared completely. Li Ming stood there quietly, staring at the portal blankly. After a moment, his eyes sank, and he looked at the ancient source order in his hand. Imogen, who was leaving Li Ming's residence, stopped at the gate of the ancient source district. He glanced at Albert behind him and said, "Did you find anything just now?" Albert bowed and saluted, with a smile on his face, and said, "Everything is normal. There is no difference between what this person said and what he thought in his heart." "Oh. So, Li Ming is really working for us in China?" Imogen said in surprise, with a little more surprise in his eyes. Albert smiled and continued to reply, "People's words and deeds can lie, but the thoughts in their brains are definitely not wrong. The great magician can rest assured." Hehe. Imogen seemed to have received a satisfactory answer. After chuckling twice, he looked back at the building where Li Ming lived and left quickly with satisfaction. At the same time, Li Ming sat at the table in the room, looking at the ancient origin order in his hand with his eyes full of thought, and whispered softly, "Give Albert what he wants to see." Imogen should be relieved. He said this, but his eyes did not leave the ancient origin order at all, and showed a thoughtful expression. The next morning, Li Ming walked out of his residence early. The two-story building on the right was very quiet, the door was closed, and Eugenia seemed to be still resting. Li Ming glanced at it, but didn't care, and walked quickly through the door in the middle of the wall. When he came to the front yard, all 6 houses came into view. Li Ming's eyes turned, and he first looked at the first room on the right, the storage room of the Space-Time Tribe. He took a few steps forward, and came to the door, took out the ancient origin order, and prepared to open the door. "What are you doing?" An old voice came from behind him. Li Ming looked back and saw that Eugenia had stood at the doorway and was looking at Li Ming. Li Ming paused and bowed his head. "There are all valuable items from the ancient tribes here. How can you go in so easily?" Eugenia said sternly with an unhappy look on her face. Li Ming looked a little flustered, but when he saw the ancient origin order in his hand, his eyes moved slightly, as if he thought of something, and raised his head and said gently, "This ancient origin district is now under my control. Last night, Grand Mage Imogen personally handed the ancient origin order to me, so I plan to check it out." Eugenia's expression changed, and she saw the ancient origin order in Li Ming's hand with a look of surprise. After some thought, Eugenia took 2 steps forward and continued, "Among these 6 houses, except for the storage rooms of the Witchcraft tribe and the Element tribe, the rooms of other tribes have not been opened, so there is no need to check." Eugenia's tone has been much softer. After all, the ancient origin order is owned by the owner of the ancient origin district, and it must be granted by the Grand Mage. Hearing this, Li Ming smiled lightly, and his expression became calmer. He said, "Since Grand Mage Imogen has handed the ancient source order to me, I naturally have to do my job conscientiously. I don't care what the condition of these storage rooms was before I came here. Now that I'm here, I must review every item in it again. There can't be any mistakes." Eugenia frowned slightly, and she actually looked a little displeased. Li Ming's expression changed, and he showed a respectful look again. After a slight bow, he continued, "Although I have joined in Kina Star, I'm a foreigner after all. The great Mage Imogen trusts me so much, how can I let him down?" Only by fulfilling my duties can I live up to the great mage's love. Eugenia slowly took 2 steps to Li Ming's front, sighed slightly, and said, if you want to see it, then take a look. Since the great mage values you so much, it is also trust in you. Li Ming smiled slightly, turned around and came back to the front of the house. With a raised hand, the ancient source token appeared in his hand. The surface of the token flashed, and then a golden arc shot out from the token. As soon as the arc approached the door, it turned into a little starlight and shattered. The starlight faded, and the door slowly opened with a creak sound. A dull breath rushed from inside. With a glance, the general situation in the house was already in sight. Li Ming walked in, and the first thing he saw was some furnishings in the middle. The space of several hundred square meters was filled with things. The middle area was filled with some relatively large objects, some of which were similar to armor and some were similar to weapons. It was a mess. The old smell showed that this room had indeed been closed for a long time, and the dust on the sundries also showed that no one had been here for a long time. In front of the left wall was a huge meteorite cabinet, which contained stardust weapons and other items that Li Ming could not identify. Li Ming walked slowly inside and looked at each item carefully. Li Ming was not interested in these items, but pretended to examine them carefully. Sometimes he picked up an item and put it in front of his eyes to look at it carefully, but soon put it back. Eugenia followed behind Li Ming and was slightly surprised by his serious attitude. I don't know how long the things in here have been there. Most of them are useless to us. The ones that can be used were sorted out long ago. Now, the only ones who can understand the ability of the space-time tribe are the witch tribe, but they have only mastered the basics like the portal. Eugenia, who was following behind, explained as she walked. Li Ming continued to walk, as if he didn't hear anything. When he reached the end, Li Ming turned around and walked around the sundries in the middle of the house to the left. There were shelves next to the wall on the left, filled with items of different sizes, some of which were shining, and some were like stones. They looked inconspicuous, but these things immediately caught Li Ming's attention. Chapter 175 Alchemy. Li Ming's gait was steady and no different from before, but his eyes were already fixed on several items. Standing in front of the shelf, Li Ming first stared at the luminous bodies and released his consciousness to sense the changes in the light. Portal? Li Ming said to himself, but his brows slightly frowned. The portals on Li Ming's body were all blue and shaped like leaves, but the ones in front of him were different. Some were purple, some were red, and the shapes were also very different, in the form of circles or light spots, which was very strange. Li Ming looked at it curiously for a few more times, and walked slowly forward with his eyes looking at an object next to the lights. This object was dark in color, the size of a palm, like a pebble, and it was a star book. Although there were a large number of items on the shelf, in addition to the luminous portals, there were some other materials, and as for the star book, there was only this one. Li Ming stretched out his right hand and took the star book in his hand. This action immediately attracted Eugenia's attention, but the other party only changed his expression slightly and did not say much. Although Li Ming picked up the item, he did not dare to look at it for fear of Eugenia's suspicion. He just looked at it casually and then put it back. This time was not enough for Li Ming to read and record the contents. Although he was very curious and wanted to take a look, he had to restrain himself as much as possible. After putting the star book back, Li Ming continued to walk forward and looked at each item one by one. He did not stop until he reached the door. I have memorized the things inside. You have just seen them, old wizard. I will check them every day in the future to make sure that every item is in good condition. Li Ming said and walked out of the house quickly. Every day. Eugenia showed a surprised expression, frowned slightly, and looked at Li Ming with puzzled eyes. After following Li Ming out of the house, Eugenia closed the door again and looked at Li Ming with a puzzled expression. Li Ming stood in the distance and nodded gently, saying, of course, in addition to daily inspections, we must keep the inside clean. Since I'm in charge of this ancient source area, I must do my best. Eugenia frowned a little more when she heard this, and she opened her mouth, about to say something but stopped. As soon as Li Ming finished speaking, he was ready to enter the next room, but before he reached the door, 4 figures suddenly came in from the distance of the courtyard. Li Ming hurriedly stopped and looked into the distance. The people who came were Imogen and Hesher, and behind them were Albert and Edmund. Li Ming and Eugenia did not dare to neglect it at all, and stepped forward quickly and bowed their heads. Imogen smiled, waved his hand, and said, "No need to be polite. Li Ming, today I came here with Grand Mage Hesher to see your ability in alchemy. Grand Mage Hesher also attaches great importance to this matter. You must show your skills in front of Grand Mage Hesher. After all, you can become an alchemy master at such a young age." Grand Mage Hesher is a little bit unconvinced. Imogen looked at Li Ming and went straight to the point. Although his origins had been explained, Li Ming's face tightened. After hesitating for a while, he said, "But I haven't made any preparations yet. If Grand Mage Hesher is willing to wait for some time, it's still in time, but I just don't know how the alchemy equipment here is," Li Ming said cautiously. At this time, without waiting for Imogen to speak, Hesher laughed twice and said, "It doesn't matter, just prepare it. I'll wait here." As soon as the voice fell, Hesher went straight to the 3-story attic in the distance. Imogen did not follow immediately, but came to Li Ming's side and whispered, "Don't worry about the materials and equipment. The warehouse behind has everything. It's just that I have already boasted in front of the great Mage Hesher. You won't let me down, right?" Li Ming was shocked when he heard this, and hurriedly bowed his head and saluted, and replied respectfully, "Disciple will definitely go all out and live up to the love of the great mage." "Yeah. Very good." Hehe. Imogen nodded with satisfaction, chuckled twice, and walked quickly to the 3-story attic. Watching the 4 people enter the attic, Li Ming's eyes turned slightly, and then walked inside. Passing through the high-walled door, the 3-story attic is already in front of you. On the right is a small courtyard and a golden tree, and the gate to the backyard is at the top of the courtyard. Li Ming turned around, walked around the tree, and came to the door, took out the ancient source order again, and opened the door. However, Eugenia, who had been following Li Ming, did not follow him, but entered the attic with those people. Li Ming didn't care. After entering the door, he walked quickly along the wall to the backyard. There were 2 separate rooms on the left and right sides of the backyard, with a black path in the middle. Li Ming went straight to the house on the left. He opened the door with the ancient source order, and a strange fragrance came to his nose. It was the smell of various medicinal materials and alchemy materials, just like entering a pharmacy. He stepped into it, and the strong smell quickly surrounded Li Ming. There were shelves on both sides, and there were all kinds of materials on them, and the middle of the room was full of alchemy equipment. These alchemy equipment are large and small, and they are different. The big ones are 2 meters high, and the small ones are only the size of the palm. They are all nebula level, and there are also differences in quality. The small one is the nebula ding, and the big one is the nebula alchemy furnace. Among the many alchemy equipment, the nebula ding is mainly in the hands of small forces or individuals. Because of its small size, it can only refine 1 pill at a time. But the advantage is that it is easy to carry. The alchemy furnace is different. It is huge in size and can refine a large number of pills each time. It is mainly used by large forces. The production process and operation of the 2 are completely different. The nebula ding is mainly based on personal techniques, and it depends entirely on the alchemist's precise energy to control the details. The alchemy furnace incorporates higher technology in it. It has an independent system that is set and controlled by the alchemist, but the details and subtle changes require the alchemist to make fine adjustments. No matter what kind of alchemy equipment, the requirements for the alchemist are extremely high. Li Ming's eyes turned and immediately locked on one of the huge alchemy furnaces. With a wave of his right hand, the huge alchemy furnace floated out from the many alchemy equipment and slowly landed in front of Li Ming. After choosing the alchemy equipment, Li Ming began to observe the materials around him. With a glance, a powerful consciousness was released. The whole room was instantly in Li Ming's induction. Every material and every medicine appeared in Li Ming's mind little by little. Fuck. Li Ming was shocked. His eyes widened a little, and his eyes looked at the materials again. No wonder it is said that only big forces can cultivate alchemy masters. There are so many materials here. Li Ming opened his mouth wide, looking around, his face full of excitement. He was dazzled by these materials. Here, in addition to the materials for refining nebula pill, there are also materials for refining beast soul pill. Judging from the alchemy star books that Li Ming has mastered, this place can basically meet all the needs. The materials placed on the shelves are only part of them. Another part is in the star bags. Hundreds of star bags are neatly displayed on the shelves, which makes Li Ming's heart beat faster. The alchemy furnace has been selected, and the materials are also sufficient. Li Ming, standing in front of the alchemy furnace, closed his eyes slightly. At the same time, a burst of green light flashed around his body. The green light quickly expanded and expanded, forming a virtual shadow similar to flames. The names of various materials kept flashing in Li Ming's mind. At the same time, green silks stretched out from the virtual green light. Each green silk was like an arm, and picked up the materials that Li Ming thought of from the shelf. A dozen green threads were like a dozen arms, stretching and shrinking to quickly collect the materials into the furnace. After more than 10 seconds, the green threads faded and disappeared, leaving only the green light phantom on the body surface. Li Ming also slightly opened his eyes. This furnace can carry 15 pills. Let's try refining 10 first. As he spoke, Li Ming slowly sat down cross-legged on the spot. At the same time, the green light phantom shot out a beam of light as thick as an arm. Once the light touched the furnace, it quickly rotated around the furnace. Li Ming sat cross-legged in the distance with his eyes closed, saying nothing, and relying entirely on his mental power to control the furnace. Just as Li Ming was concentrating on refining the pill, a figure hurriedly walked in from the door of the ancient source area. This person was Marquis, but his steps were hurried, and his expression was panicked, as if something extremely important had happened. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.